Chapter 976. Chapter 976, Chapter 976, The Arrival of the Patriarch. Wang Baoli raised his head proudly. His eyes were filled with arrogance as he looked down at his surroundings. His gaze gave off the feeling that he was looking at an ant. It was as if after he had said those words, he had removed all his concealment and revealed his true identity. He looked like a prince as he looked at the living beings who were trying to provoke him. The yellow flame Tao circulated within him after he said those words. It exploded out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it spread out to the outside world, causing him to look at it from a distance. It was as if a flower of flame had bloomed. It shone with a brilliant light that shook heaven and earth. At the same time, his words contained the power of the initial stage of the planet realm. As it spread out, he used his Tao star to affect the natural laws, causing it to explode out in all directions like heavenly lightning. They even formed ripples that spread out in all directions. Not only were the star almighties from the purple gold civilization in front and behind him bearing the brunt of the impact, the 9 planets were also affected. The cultivators from the purple gold civilization who had surrounded the area, who were further away, all heard Wang Baoli's words. Their cultivation began to tremble. The power of the Tao stars erupted at that moment, instantly forming a suppressive force. Everyone below the planets were shocked. Wang Baoli's suppression of their cultivation levels was stronger than that of the other planets. Even though they weren't planets and didn't have control over the rules, they had their own divine abilities that they were good at. These divine abilities, even though there were all sorts of them, many of them were included in Wang Baoli's 9 rules. Therefore, the suppressive force formed by his words was naturally stronger. Not only were their cultivation levels shaken, their minds buzzed uncontrollably. Their vision seemed to blur. If not for the existence of stars and planets, this so-called predicament would have seemed like a joke. Even the Sky Palm Elder and the other 9 planets' expressions changed immediately. 5 of them were in the initial stage of the planets, 2 were in the middle stage, and 2 were in the late stage of the planets. However, at that moment, the bodies of the 5 initial stage planets trembled as well. Although they were much better than the cultivators below the planet, the trembling of the planets within their bodies forced them to admit. Once they fought with Wang Baoli, they were no match for him under the suppression of the rules and laws. Even if they were at the mid-stage of the planet, they were only slightly better than the initial stage. Even the Sky Palm Elder and the Heavenly Spirit Sect's Peak Lord, who were at the late stage of the planet, were shaken. They felt a sense of oppression. They knew very well that this scene represented the suppression of the laws and the suppression of the laws. It meant that this Long Nanzi was already a world away from what he had been before. The 2 Star Almighty's expressions also changed. However, what caused the waves in their minds was not the fluctuation of the laws caused by their Tao stars, but the name that they had mentioned. Blazing Progenitor. Their minds buzzed, and the fear that instinctively surfaced in their hearts could not be concealed. However, most of them still did not believe it. It was really the name of Blazing Progenitor. The meaning that it represented was too great. He was a star domain almighties, an existence that surpassed countless stars. Even in the entire left Tao holy region, such a figure was as rare as a phoenix feather or a Chilean horn. Any one of them was extremely famous, and the moment they were angered, it would cause a disaster for countless galaxies. And their purple gold civilization seemed valiant. It seemed like their progenitor was only half a step away from the star field, and could already be considered to be standing at the peak of the stars. However, they knew very well, the difficulty of this half-step leap was almost unimaginable. To describe it as a fish leaping over a dragon's gate was already considered good. It could even be said that if there was no external help, then the blazing flame progenitor alone could make their purple gold civilization disappear from this world. Even though the purple gold civilization had a faction backing it, and there was a celestial domain ancestor in that faction, they were still a vassal, not the ancestor's sect. Therefore, if they provoked the blazing flame ancestor, the consequences would be dire. It would be disadvantageous for the purple gold civilization. Rumors had it that the blazing flame ancestor didn't get along with the Wei Yang clan. Not only was he powerful, he was also extremely protective of his own shortcomings. Anyone who got close to him in the blazing flame galaxy would cause him to be displeased. It was even more so when it came to bullying his disciple. This made the 2 of them extremely shocked. However, the more shocked they were, the more they felt that it was impossible. The logic was simple. If Wang Baoli was really the personal disciple of the blazing flame ancestor, then, there was no need for him to hide his previous actions. It was obvious that he had some qualms about placing the people he cared about outside. Other than that, there was also a strong sense of unwillingness. They couldn't give up all their plans just because of Wang Baoli's words. All their efforts would be for naught, after all. This was the key to the Purple Gold civilization's advancement to the next level. It was also the Purple Gold civilization's ancestor, who was at the pinnacle of the stars. He was using this opportunity to exchange for a rare opportunity to break through. Therefore, in the next instant, the Star Almighty before Wang Baoli had a cold look in his eyes as he laughed out loud. The blazing flame ancestor is your master? What a joke! Why didn't you say that Divine Emperor Wei Yang is your master? That's a bunch of nonsense. Wang Baoli stood on the boat and stared coldly at the Star Almighty, who was clearly nervous but had put on an act. He was clearly filled with murderous intent. He thought to himself that the Divine Emperor wasn't my master, but Chen Qingzi, who had killed the Divine Emperor. He is my senior brother. However, that wasn't important. Wang Baoli didn't plan to reveal all his trump cards here. As soon as the Star Almighty spoke, he raised his right hand and flipped it, taking out a jade slip. The jade slip contained the power of a curse. It was given to him by the blazing flame ancestor. He had even told the Star Almighty that if he was done considering becoming his master, he would use the jade slip to inform him. Just as he was about to pinch it, the Star Almighty laughed coldly and spoke again. Long Nanzi, don't say those useless words. Since you insist on becoming a joke, then don't blame me. As he spoke, the Star Almighty waved his right hand, and instantly, the killing intent in the eyes of the 9 planets behind him grew stronger. They instantly formed hand seals, and in the next instant, the bubble that had sealed Zhao Yameng, the donkey, and Little Five suddenly began to shine. Black gas appeared from within and surrounded their bodies. Wherever it passed by, Zhao Yameng, the donkey, and Little Five began to show signs of corrosion in their unconscious state. Even though they were unconscious, pain appeared on their faces. This scene caused the killing intent in Wang Baoli's heart to explode. He didn't notice that Little Five, who was in the bubble, seemed to be moving his fingers slightly, but he held it in immediately. Wang Baoli, who didn't notice this scene, laughed angrily as the killing intent exploded. He crushed the jade slip in his hand without any hesitation. His voice was filled with killing intent as he spoke to the starry sky. Disciple Wang Baoli, please help me save people and suppress these 2 ignorant stars. The moment Wang Baoli spoke, the moment the jade slip was crushed, an old laughter that seemed to have been waiting for a long time, filled with anticipation and excitement, immediately reverberated within the Divine Eye civilization. It was just laughter, it caused the Divine Eye civilization to tremble and the stars to dim. Cracks appeared on the seal formed by the crystal piece. It also caused the minds of all the cultivators in the area to rumble. Even the 2 Star Almighties weren't spared. Their expressions changed completely. The galaxy. Blazing flame ancestor. As the 2 Stellar Almighties screamed in shock, their bodies retreated rapidly. Fleeing in front of the Stellar Almighties was nothing more than a joke. However, they were driven by their instincts, and they continued to run frantically. However, as they retreated, in front of Wang Baoli's ship, a huge whirlpool suddenly appeared silently in the starry sky. A sea of fire erupted from within the whirlpool, surging out like a volcano. It didn't spread. Instead, as the suppressive force that shook the starry sky spread, it formed 2 flaming whips that shot towards the 2 escaping stars in front and behind Wang Baoli. In that instant, the 2 flaming whips, with the suppressive force of the starfield and boundless power, landed directly on the bodies of the 2 Star Almighties. As the whips passed by, their physical bodies instantly collapsed. Chapter 977. Chapter 977, Chapter 977, Tyranny. For Star Almighties, killing a planet was as easy as flipping one's hand. As for Star Domain Almighties, killing a star, to use the word as easy as flipping one's hand would be to overestimate a star. Although a star was powerful, the deeper one's cultivation base was, the greater the gap between their realms. If the comparison between a planet and a star was described as 1,000 times, then the difference between a star domain and a star would be at least 10,000 times. As such, for the blazing flame ancestor, his true form didn't even need to appear. Just the flames released by his divine sense were enough to destroy the bodies and souls of the 2 stars of the purple gold civilization. As for his true form, even if he stood there and allowed the 2 stars to attack him, even if the starry sky collapsed, the blazing flame ancestor would still be unharmed, because the damage he received was far less than his own recovery. Published on listnovel.c0m. This was the difference. Therefore, the instant the blazing flame ancestor's divine sense transformed into a flaming whip, it had already determined this so-called predicament. Indeed, it was a complete joke. In an instant, these 2 star almighties within the purple gold civilization could be said to be below 1 person. They couldn't even let out a miserable cry. Their bodies collapsed in that instant, and their flesh and blood were reduced to ashes in the flames. Their souls didn't have the right to escape either. They were destroyed in body and soul. However, due to the heavenly Tao rules of the never-ending Dao domain, even though they were destroyed in body and soul, they had still left a mark in the heavenly Tao. It wasn't impossible for them to be resurrected in the future, but the prerequisite was that Wang Baoli hadn't made a move. He had long been filled with murderous intent towards the 2 stellar almighties. He would never show mercy to those who threatened him. Furthermore, the existence of the blazing flame ancestor here, he didn't need to worry about his secret being exposed. After all, the blazing flame ancestor had been able to see through his relationship with Chen Qingzi and had exposed it with a single sentence. There was no need for him to hide it too much. That was why the moment the blazing flame ancestor made his move and the 2 mighty figures from the stars were destroyed in body and soul, Wang Baoli's eyes flashed. He raised his right hand and formed a seal. Immediately, a gigantic black nightmare eye appeared behind him. This black nightmare eye was different from when he was a spirit immortal. There was only 1 pupil in the eye, but there were a total of 10 circles in it. This made the nightmare eye look extremely demonic. Even if a planet were to look at it, it would be extremely shocking. Swallow! The moment the black nightmare eye appeared, Wang Baoli spoke coldly. Immediately, the black eye behind him emitted an evil glow, and there was an undetectable dark fire flickering within it. In an instant, it sucked in the invisible mark of the 2 star almighty existences that had been destroyed in body and soul, wiping them away. Wang Baoli's body expanded rapidly as well. A large amount of soul power from the 2 stars was transmitted frantically through the nightmare eye, causing his cultivation to rise slowly as it fluctuated. The starry sky shook, as if lightning had streaked across. The blazing flame ancestor witnessed the scene, but he didn't say anything. More sea of fire spread out from the whirlpool, sealing off the entire Divine Eye galaxy. It also enveloped the bubble where Zhao Yameng, the donkey, and Little Five were. It formed a protective barrier, and its voice reverberated in the starry sky, shaking the 9 planets around it. Countless cultivators were shocked, and their voices reverberated in all directions. "Disciple, do you need me to help you clean up this place?" The blazing flame ancestor was very pleased with his disciple's words. When Wang Baoli heard it, he couldn't help but feel emotional, but he was also grateful. After all, the blazing flame ancestor's actions this time meant a lot to Wang Baoli. Not only did it resolve the crisis he was in, but it had also taken the responsibility for his possession of the Tao Star. Wang Baoli was touched by this kindness. He had truly decided in his heart that this apprenticeship, no matter what happened in the future, he would carry on forever. Therefore, he didn't stand on ceremony with his master. Instead, he cupped his fists and bowed before speaking respectfully. "My heart is filled with murderous intent. If I don't vent it out, I won't be able to understand it. Therefore, I can handle the rest of the matters here. Master, please help me intimidate everyone and ensure the safety of my hometown." "Yes." The blazing flame ancestor laughed loudly. He retracted his telepathic thoughts and disappeared. As the blazing flame ancestor laughed, he left with his telepathic thoughts. However, the flames in the area still remained. As they sealed off the area, they also completely sealed off the area. The hundreds of thousands of cultivators and the 9 planets around them trembled with fear in their eyes. They stared at Wang Baoli, especially the Heaven Palm ancestor and the others. Their eyes were filled with despair and madness. They had seen and heard everything. They knew very well that Wang Baoli didn't use the power of the flames to purge everything. He wanted to personally suppress everything and end everything. However, in their eyes, he was too arrogant. After all, there were 9 of them, especially the Heaven Palm Ancestor and the Heavenly Spirit Sect Lord. They were in the late stage of the planet realm. The Blazing Flame Ancestor's pressure made it impossible for them to unleash all of their combat abilities. However, if the 9 of them joined forces, they would be able to defeat a planet that had just advanced. Even if the other party had fused with a Tao star, they would still have a chance of victory. However, they didn't think that Wang Baoli didn't understand such an obvious thing. There must be other secrets hidden within. Therefore, everyone was anxious. Just as the Skypalm Elder was about to speak, Wang Baoli took a step forward. He walked out of the meteorite cruiser. Without realizing it, I've been in the Divine Eye civilization for many years, Wang Baoli spoke calmly as he walked. Among all of you, there are some that I know and some that I'm not familiar with. Now that everything is about to end, in return for what you've done, I feel that there's something that I need to let all of you know, Wang Baoli said. Wang Baoli had already walked out of the Starfall ship and stood in the starry skies. He stared at the Skypalm and the others, whose expressions had changed. The person standing before you is merely a clone. When the Skypalm and the others heard those words, they felt as if they had been struck by lightning. Before their hearts could stir, Wang Baoli raised his right hand. He pointed in the direction of the Divine Eye main star and spoke calmly. Return, my true self. As soon as those words were spoken, the Divine Eye main star roared and changed drastically. At the same time, outside the solar system, which was very far away from the Divine Eye civilization, in the starry sky where the strongest patriarch of the Purple Gold civilization was located. The strongest patriarch of the Purple Gold civilization had been meditating with his eyes closed. His purpose in coming here was to use this place to intimidate Wang Baoli and to hand over the Tao planet. He was waiting for news from the Divine Eye civilization. He hadn't received the news, but his heart had palpitated. The moment the Blazing Flame Patriarch's aura descended, his expression changed drastically. His breathing quickened, and he opened his eyes abruptly. He stared at the starry sky before him. Soon, he saw a vast sea of fire. A vast sea of fire appeared without a sound. The sea of fire was so vast that it seemed to have no borders. It was larger than a galaxy. When it appeared, the flames within roiled, forming a gigantic head. The head was vast and boundless, and its hair swayed as if it were a galaxy. It was right in front of the most powerful patriarch of the Violet Gold civilization. It looked at him coldly. The 2 of them were like heaven and earth. Compared to the head, the most powerful patriarch of the Violet Gold civilization could not even be considered an ant. His gaze alone caused the planet beneath the most powerful patriarch of the Violet Gold civilization to wither. It was as if it had been burned into ashes. He trembled, his face pale and his body trembling. His heart was in turmoil, and he had no choice but to drop to his knees and kowtow. The most powerful star of the Violet Gold civilization spoke in a trembling voice. The intense pressure caused him to come to a realization. I am Zhu Ming, the disciple in name of Dao Xinzi, son of the Heavenly Accumulation Sect. Greetings. Patriarch Blazing Flame. With a single thought, he would most likely be destroyed in body and soul. That was because, the person who had appeared was the true body of a major power from the celestial domain, not his divine sense. That was why he had created such a crushing scene. He was even more aware that for a major power from the celestial domain to descend upon his true body, it meant that he must have come with a very great purpose. It was clear that he had no good intentions, which made him even more nervous. That was why he didn't mention the Purple Gold civilization for no reason. Instead, he spoke of his other identity. The Heavenly Accumulation Sect was the #1 sect in the Left Dao Holy region. It was also the sect where the scholarly cultivator was located in the Fallen Star Lands. Dao Xinzi was also one of the 9 great galaxies in the sect. However, to the Blazing Flame Ancestor, he dared to provoke the Wei Yang clan. Naturally, he didn't care about Dao Xinzi. He spoke coldly, and as if he was giving orders, he spoke 3 sentences. Wang Baoli is my personal disciple. I'll give you a month to send me an apology. Now, scram. Chapter 978. Chapter 978 was about to be reintroduced. The blazing flame ancestor's dominance was evident from the 3 sentences. The first sentence was to tell the other party Wang Baoli's identity, the second sentence was to make the other party apologize, and the third sentence was to expel him immediately. Regardless of whether it was reasonable or not, I will not argue with you. Rather than calling it a notification, it would be better to call it an order. Read on listnovel.c0m for faster updates. I will not ask for the reason, nor will I care about your background. I will only deal with it according to my way. As for you, you have to obey, and if you don't, you have to obey. As the #1 expert of the Violet Gold civilization, the Patriarch, whose cultivation base had reached the pinnacle of the stars, knelt there. His body trembled, and his heart was filled with grievance. However, he did not dare to resist. He did not even dare to raise his head, the thoughts in his heart did not dare to show the slightest bit. The only thing he could do was to respectfully acknowledge. After the blazing flame elder's flaming head slowly dissipated, he finally dared to raise his head. His expression was bitter as he stood in silence for a moment. In the end, his expression was gloomy as he looked at the solar system in front of him. He turned around in a flash and chose to leave. He had already guessed that the 2 stars under his command that had gone to the Divine Eye civilization must have fallen. And the fate of all the purple gold civilization cultivators that had remained in the Divine Eye civilization could also be predicted. Such a loss, it could be said that the purple gold civilization had suffered even more than they had suffered. All of this was because of Wang Baoli. However, he didn't dare to take revenge. His heart was in a state of depression and madness. He couldn't hold it in as he sped forward. He threw his head back and let out an extremely loud roar. Wang Baoli, you have such a background. Why didn't you say so earlier? As he roared, he sped up and left frantically. He knew that he still had to prepare an apology. No matter how aggrieved he felt, the apology had to be heavier. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. As he sped forward, the 9 skypalm cultivators in the Divine Eye galaxy felt as if they were being struck by lightning. As Wang Baoli spoke, he raised his right hand and pointed at the Divine Eye main star. The Divine Eye main star immediately shook violently. The ground churned and the sky changed. Wang Baoli's original body, who was in the coffin, opened his eyes. The moment he did so, the ground shook violently once again. The soil around the coffin collapsed, giant cracks spread out, covering a radius of 1,000 miles. The land, which was 1,000 miles away, exploded in the cracks. As the land collapsed, the coffin rushed out for the first time in many years. It left the ground like a shooting star, it drew a long, bright arc and charged into the starry sky. It was so fast that it surpassed the speed of an ordinary planet. It appeared directly on the battlefield in the starry sky. Amidst the shock of the cultivators and the 9 sky palm cultivators, the coffin whistled through the air and reached the top of the battlefield in the blink of an eye. As it appeared, an even stronger pressure spread out from the coffin. As the runes on the coffin shone, an ancient aura of time spread out continuously, causing everyone on the battlefield to. Their hearts were once again in turmoil. As their hearts were in turmoil, Wang Baoli smiled, his eyes filled with anticipation. See you all in a while. As he said that, Wang Baoli's body swayed, and he instantly turned into a cloud of fog that charged towards the coffin. Under the watchful eyes of everyone around, the fog that his figure had turned into, it immediately spread to the coffin and entered it. He had been in the Divine Eye civilization for many years. In order to avoid the Wei Yang heavenly Tao, he had no choice but to use the technique that his senior brother had taught him to condense his origin dharmic body. He had cultivated his dharmic body outside until now. At that moment, just as everything in the Divine Eye civilization was about to come to an end, Wang Baoli finally allowed his clone to merge with his original body. As the mist from his origin clone merged with the coffin, the mist that his clone had turned into instantly enveloped his original body. It flowed through his 7 orifices and all the pores on his body. As it merged with his original body, it also merged with his cultivation. Other than that, there were also the rules of the 9 ancient stars and the Tao stars. As the clone and his original body were of the same origin, the merger this time was a transfer of the Tao stars. However, there was no hindrance at all. The merger ended almost instantly. The moment it ended, Wang Baoli, who was in the coffin, his body shook violently. The ripples of his cultivation erupted violently at that moment. His original body was already powerful. Now that he had fused with his clone, his battle prowess had also increased exponentially. The feeling of finally having a physical body made Wang Baoli's body and mind become one, and the circulation of the Tao stars in his body became even smoother. The laws continued to evolve in his body, and his cultivation had increased as a result. He hadn't reached the mid-stage of the planet realm, but in terms of battle prowess, it had increased tremendously. At the same time, as he was fusing with the laws, the Skypalm Elder and the others' eyes were filled with ferocity and an uncontrollable madness. They knew very well that no matter how arrogant Wang Baoli was this time, under the suppression of the mighty figure in the galaxy, they wouldn't be able to leave this place alive. Furthermore, Wang Baoli was clearly not going to let them off. It could be said that no matter what, they would die. That being the case, amidst their madness, all of them grew frantic and agitated in despair, and their killing intent grew stronger. Right at that moment, the coffin that was the focus of everyone's attention, exuding an ancient aura, suddenly emitted cracking sounds. The coffin's lid could be seen with the naked eye. Under countless gazes, it slowly began to move. When it was halfway opened, a hand reached out from within the pitch-black coffin. It was a hand that was made of flesh and blood. The moment the hand appeared, the heavenly spirit sect master roared in grief and indignation. "Listen up, everyone. Cultivators of the Violet Gold civilization, even if we have to die, we will die together with this scoundrel." With that, he shot toward the coffin, and not just him, but all of the other planets, all of the planets, including the sect leader, also attacked. As for the cultivators in the area, all of them went crazy, unleashing magical techniques and divine abilities that filled the sky as they shot toward the coffin. However, even as the magical techniques and divine abilities slammed into the coffin, a calm voice echoed out from within the coffin. "Talk about war on paper." At the same time, the hand that had emerged from within the coffin formed a hand incantation, which caused everyone who saw it to be completely shaken. In fact, the paper figure on the meteor ship, which had never left, suddenly began to shine with a strange light. A strange light appeared in its eyes. The hand that had originally been flesh and blood, suddenly became a paper hand. In the instant that it became a paper hand, a power of law that no cultivator in the area had ever seen before spread out. In that instant, countless divine abilities and magical techniques exploded out, including those of the 9 planets, as well as the combined efforts of all the cultivators in the area. As they neared the paper hand, they transformed into pieces of paper. "This is impossible!" cried the Heavenly Spirit Sect's Peak Lord in shock. This isn't a magical technique. This is a law. It's not a law. I've never heard of any law that can transform everything into paper." The other planets were all shocked to the extreme, and they began to cry out in shock. Only the Heavenly Palm Patriarch was the first to fall back. He gave up and attempted to flee. Clearly, he was completely shocked by what he saw. No matter what divine ability, magical technique, or magical item, they all turned into sheets of paper in the blink of an eye. It was a shocking scene. All of the divine abilities and magical techniques that had been unleashed earlier had been unleashed with incredible momentum. Now, they floated down to the ground. From a distance, they looked like snowflakes, or rain of paper. It was a feeling of powerlessness that caused people to feel despair. Just as everyone in the area was panicking and their scalps were tingling with fear, that paper hand pressed down on the edge of the coffin, causing the figure within to slowly stand up from within the coffin. It was revealed before everyone's eyes. It had black hair and was dressed in a long black robe. Its eyes were like stars, and its face was as sharp as a knife. Its edges and corners were distinct, and at the same time, it had an imposing aura that caused people's hearts to tremble. It continued to spread out from the figure, affecting the starry sky. It caused the entire Divine Eye civilization to tremble. Flames surrounded it, and the eyes of the Divine Eye and the stars shone brightly. This appearance was different from Long Nan's. It made everyone in the area feel unfamiliar, but at the same time, they felt a strong wave of emotions. Just as everyone was trembling in fear, the figure dressed in black walked out of the coffin. He spoke calmly. "Let's get to know each other again. I am the President of the Solar System Federation, Wang Baoli." Chapter 979. Chapter 979, Chapter 979, Suppression. As Wang Baoli walked out, an orange star appeared faintly behind him. As the star appeared, Wang Baoli's words reverberated in all directions, spreading throughout the entire Divine Eye civilization. All the planets, including the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord, and even the Sky Palm Elder, who had retreated in an attempt to escape, trembled violently. It wasn't that the meaning behind Wang Baoli's words was shocking. It was that the moment the words entered their ears, they seemed to form a strange force, as if they contained a law. It turned into a thunderous roar that surpassed heavenly thunder. It exploded crazily within their divine senses. They weren't the only ones. The hundreds of thousands of purple gold civilization cultivators around them all felt their minds reeling at that moment. It was as if Wang Baoli's words had turned into hundreds of thousands of sharp blades that shot towards all of them without form. They pierced through their bodies and into their souls. This was the Tao of Orange Joy. They had incorporated the Tao of Orange Joy into their voices, allowing their words to be imbued with the power of the Tao. It wasn't particularly ingenious, which was why they weren't able to accurately kill with their voices. However, with their Tao of Orange Joy, they could use their voices to spread it out and shake their enemies' minds, causing their minds to buzz and become dazed. It was still possible. In fact, among the hundreds of thousands of violet gold cultivators in the area, there were some whose cultivation bases were weak or had internal injuries. At that moment, their minds began to rumble, and their souls began to hurt. Their bodies trembled, and blood sprayed out of their mouths. Their eyes instantly grew dim, their souls were instantly destroyed, leaving behind only corpses that floated in the air. Only the Heavenly Spirit Peak Lord and the other planets were affected by the Tao of Joy. However, because of how powerful they were able to quickly recover from the effects of the Tao of Joy. Their eyes shone with madness, as if they were trapped beasts. At that moment, an even more intense struggle erupted. We're all going to die in battle. Since that's the case, I don't believe that we can't do anything to an early-stage planet cultivator who just advanced. We might only be immortal planets at most, but so what if we're Tao planets? The winner takes all. This time, we're fighting for good fortune. Although we've failed, the consequences will be the most severe. We'll die, and our Tao will disappear. Kill! The planet cultivators of the Purple Gold civilization were much stronger than the Divine Eye civilization when it came to fighting with their lives on the line. That was why even though the Sky Palm had escaped and the new Tao ancestor had hesitated, the eyes of the other Purple Gold planets were red. As the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord roared, their cultivation erupted. Planets materialized and charged at Wang Bao at high speed. With them taking the lead, the hundreds of thousands of purple gold cultivators around them seemed to be encouraged as well, as if they were about to launch another attack. As he watched all of this, Wang Baoli's eyes shone with a strange light. What he wanted was this kind of imposing manner from the other party. The reason why he didn't let his master, the Blazing Flame Ancestor, make a move was partly because he wanted to vent the anger in his heart. After all, the other party had plotted against him first and threatened him to be behind. If it wasn't for the Blazing Flame Ancestor this time, even the solar system would have been wiped out. Therefore, his anger wouldn't show the mercy of a woman just because the other party had too many people and too many massacres. What he wanted was a massacre. On the other hand, he wanted to make use of this opportunity to perfect his 9 rules. Therefore, after the Tao of Joy of the Orange was unleashed and the cultivation of Tianling and the others erupted, Wang Baoli calmly took a second step forward. He raised his right hand and waved it gently in all directions. Blood! As soon as the words left his mouth, a series of shrill screams rang out from the hundreds of thousands of cultivators who had been led by the planets and were feeling restless. Almost all of the hundreds of thousands of cultivators were bleeding from their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth at that moment. The bleeding was not due to the shock. It was because the blood in their bodies seemed to reject them at that moment. It didn't want to stay in their bodies. It was as if there was a strong call from outside, and it wanted to rush out of their bodies. In that instant, tens of thousands of cultivators couldn't control their screams. Their bodies collapsed with a loud crash. That was due to the impact caused by the blood rushing out. As their bodies were destroyed, their souls dissipated as well. The only thing that remained was the blood that gathered crazily towards Wang Baoli. In the blink of an eye, it formed a sea of blood. As for those who gritted their teeth and persevered, even though they could barely hold on because of Wang Baoli's scattered rules, they were now extremely shocked. The will to fight to the death that had just risen in their hearts also collapsed instantly. No one knew who started first. They retreated rapidly in fear, as if they had forgotten that even if they tried to escape, they wouldn't be able to escape from the blockade. They continued to scatter in all directions. As for the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord and the others, even though they were resisting Wang Baoli's blood Dao rules with their own cultivation, they were still charging towards him. However, what awaited them was the sea of blood that Wang Baoli had gathered under the blood Dao rules. The sea of blood seemed to possess sentience. As it swept towards them, it turned into a huge mouth and started devouring the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord and the other planets. With a loud boom, as the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord and the others were blocked, Wang Baoli spoke calmly and activated the third law. Cloud Dao. Clouds were ever-changing, and illusions were spells. The moment Wang Baoli spoke, green stars appeared behind him. As the stars revolved, the laws in the area were immediately affected. In that instant, a strange scene appeared. The hundreds of thousands of cultivators who had lost their will to fight and were frantically scattering in all directions suddenly shuddered. Their eyes turned red, and they turned their heads to attack their companions. They attacked with all their might. It wasn't just one or two of them. More than half of the cultivators were affected, as if they were hallucinating. Their senses told them that the people around them were the key to affecting their lives. As long as they killed their companions, they would be able to survive. As a result, under the illusory technique, the shrill screams in the area grew even louder than before. The entire battlefield seemed to be in a state of chaos. Hundreds of thousands of cultivators were engaged in a frenzied battle. There was even a hint of the blood Dao. The blood in the area grew thicker and thicker. It also highlighted the strange look on Wang Baoli's face as he stood calmly in the center of the battlefield. Wang Baoli! The Heavenly Spirit Sect Master let out a shrill scream. His hair was disheveled. Due to his powerful cultivation, even though he had been suppressed, he hadn't been affected too much. He remained clear-headed, but everything around him, it caused his heart to ache with extreme pain. That was because, the hundreds of thousands of cultivators were almost all disciples of his Heavenly Spirit sect. You fiend! So many people, they're all weaklings. Don't you have the slightest bit of compassion in your heart? Faced with the Heavenly Spirit Palm's roar, Wang Baoli turned his head to look at them, who were blocked by a large amount of blood. A cold glint appeared in his eyes as he stared at the crazed Heavenly Spirit Palm. Compassion? When your purple gold civilization slaughtered the God's Eye civilization, did you show any compassion? When the purple gold civilization forced me to hand over the Dao Star, did you show mercy? When the purple gold civilization threatened me with my home, the solar system, did you show mercy? Today, I am the one who has turned the tables. If not for that, all the lives in my home would have been massacred. I wonder if you, the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord, would show mercy if this happened. Fine, I'll show mercy once. As Wang Baoli said that, he raised his right hand and formed another seal. A black star rose high behind him. Immediately, an aura that represented death erupted. The Tao of Death. As soon as he said that, the aura of death erupted from the black star and spread in all directions. The starry sky seemed to shatter wherever it passed. The purple gold cultivators who were engaged in battle trembled, they began to wither, and as they did so, their life force was forcibly converted into the aura of death. As it spread out, the entire battlefield turned into a gigantic vortex. As the vortex spun with a rumble, it gathered all the aura of death that was spreading out from the bodies of the cultivators. Looking around, the hundreds of thousands of cultivators on the battlefield all had dull expressions on their faces. In the end, as the sect master of Celestial Spirit Sect roared madly, all of them turned into ashes and disappeared into the starry skies. The entire battlefield was emptied. Now, it's your turn. As the 4 stars behind him materialized, Wang Baoli looked at the Heavenly Spirit Sect Master, raised his right hand, and said calmly, "Everyone here cannot escape." Chapter 980. Chapter 980, Tao Star Suppression. As soon as he said that, Wang Baoli raised his right hand and clenched it. Instantly, the giant vortex that had absorbed the death chi of hundreds of thousands of cultivators on the battlefield let out a loud boom. The vortex itself changed as well, turning into a giant palm. The moment Wang Baoli's right hand clenched, the palm also clenched. The heavenly spirit palm lord and the others who were within the range of the palm were enraged. However, under this divine ability, their expressions changed. They spread out rapidly, and the palm that was formed from the death vortex. With a sound that reverberated throughout the God's Eye civilization, the palm was completely gripped. Read on listnovel.c0m for faster updates. As the palm was gripped, a loud boom reverberated. Immediately, the sound of planets collapsing and self-destructing could be heard coming from the palm. However, Wang Baoli's opponents were, after all, multiple planets. Even though the quality of their own planets was not high, they still had the advantage in numbers. Furthermore, the heavenly spirit palm lord was at the late stage of the planet realm. Therefore, as the sound of planets self-destructing rang out, a flash of sword light erupted from the palm and sliced open a crack in the palm. As the crack appeared, several beams of light shot out from within. Of the original 8 people, only 7 were left. The one who had died was the new Tao Patriarch. Other than the heavenly spirit palm lord and the 2 mid-stage planet cultivators, the rest of the 7 were all early-stage planet cultivators, and they were all injured. The moment they charged out, the 7 quickly separated, and 4 of them retreated. They split into 4 directions, as if they wanted to escape. As for the other 3, they charged towards Wang Baoli. The leader of the 3 was the heavenly spirit palm lord. The 2 behind him were from the purple gold civilization as well. Their cultivation might not be as high as the heavenly spirit palm lords, but they were still mid-stage planet cultivators. They were all in a sorry state. However, the madness and killing intent emanating from their bodies was extremely strong. Separate? Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes and smiled faintly. The moment the heavenly spirit palm lord and the other 2 arrived, his body swayed. The blue stars behind him materialized, and the wind Dao laws descended. His speed reached its peak in the next instant, an afterimage appeared. With a single step, he crossed the starry skies and arrived before one of the 4 planet cultivators who had split up and fled. He was a middle-aged man. Even though he was in a sorry state, the moment he saw Wang Baoli, a ferocious look appeared in his eyes. He seemed to be filled with despair and madness as he roared. "You've been tricked. Seal!" As he spoke, he chose to self-destruct without any hesitation. As the destructive ripples erupted, countless rays of light shot out from his body. His planet was also shattered at that moment. As the loud sound reverberated, his body, his soul, and his planet, all of them exploded, and the power of the explosion spread out in all directions. At the same time, the other 3 early-stage planets from the violet gold civilization who had fled in other directions also laughed bitterly, and madness appeared in their eyes. At the instant the middle-aged planet self-destructed, they also chose to self-destruct without hesitation. Seal! 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 The power of a planet's self-destruct would be several times greater than its own. Now that the 4 early-stage planets self-destructed together, the power would be even greater, and the destructive ripples between them would overlap. Therefore, the power of the self-destruct would be even more powerful. The places where they had fled previously seemed to be scattered, but if one looked closely, one could see that even though the 4 of them were fleeing, the gaps between them seemed to contain some profound meaning, as if they were connected by branches and leaves. It was hidden within the array formation. That was indeed the case. The self-detonation on the bodies of the 4 cultivators from the planet of the purple gold civilization was a type of sealing technique. In the purple gold civilization, this technique could be considered a great supernatural power, as it contained the laws of life. It was also a type of plant law that contained the will of life. That was why it was so powerful. Now that the 4 of them had used the power of self-detonation, it was naturally even more powerful. As the 4 of them self-destructed, a thread appeared in each of their collapsed bodies and planets. It was like a plant fiber that swept towards Wang Baoli in an instant, as if it would lock onto him. There was no escape. In the next instant, the 4 threads surpassed Wang Baoli's wind path at an indescribable speed and wrapped around his body forcefully, with a sudden tug. Wang Baoli was trapped in the starry skies. It wasn't over yet. Almost at the moment when the 4 early-stage cultivators on the planet self-destructed, the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord and the other 2 who had charged at Wang Baoli turned their heads abruptly. They moved at a speed that was even faster than before. Their lives were on fire at that moment. In exchange, they were able to move at an even faster speed and exhaust their potential. They formed hand seals and roared at each other. Heavenly Spirit Seal. As he roared, the Heavenly Spirit Palm's hair was disheveled, and his body exploded with intense light. The light transformed into a giant seal outside his body. It was supported by the burning of the cultivation of the 2 mid-stage planets behind him, causing the seal to instantly. The light reached its peak, becoming the brightest light in the starry sky, second only to the stars. It buzzed towards Wang Baoli. It was a seal formed by the self-destruction of 4 planets at the initial stage. It was a heavenly spirit power formed by the self-destruction of 1 planet at the later stage, and 2 planets at the middle stage at the cost of their lives. It could be said that, in such a short period of time, the thought of this strategy and the planning of such a counterattack was enough to prove the Heavenly Spirit Palm's shrewdness. The seal formed by the self-destruction of the 4 planets at the initial stage contained rules, and the seal formed by the self-destruction of the 4 planets was even more so for the Heavenly Spirit Palm. Even though the Heavenly Spirit Palm had advanced from the immortal planet and the planets didn't have rules, he had borrowed the power of the Heavenly Spirit sect's mystic arts. Using his own cultivation base and the burning of the 2 planets at the intermediate stage, he unleashed the Heavenly Spirit Seal, the #1 secret technique of the Heavenly Spirit sect. This allowed the rules of light contained within this secret technique to be revealed to the world. If it was someone else, even if it was someone at the planet completion level, they would definitely not be able to escape from their combined forces. However, the difference between the levels of the planets would sometimes cause those who had fused with lower-level planets to despair. They would even feel a strong sense of injustice. They were both planets. Those who had advanced from a mortal planet wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from a cultivator who had advanced from a spirit planet. It was even more so when a spirit planet faced an immortal planet. As for the special planets, when faced with the rules, even an immortal planet wasn't much different from a mortal planet. Furthermore, Wang Baoli had fused with a Tao planet that had advanced from 9 ancient planets. It could be said that even though Wang Baoli was only at the initial stage of the planet realm, the rules that he had mastered and the grade of his planet allowed him to be at the planet realm. If the other party didn't have a special planet, then even if he was at the perfected planet realm, he still didn't have the right to raise his head in front of him. It was just like how no matter how big a balloon was, it was still a balloon. No matter how small a nail was, it was still a nail. If numbers can make up for the difference, then, why must there be so many levels in cultivation, and why must planets contain grades? Of course. This is not fixed, but you don't have it. Wang Baoli, who was entangled by the 4 binding threads, thought to himself, at that moment, he deeply understood the power of the laws of the special stars. To cultivators who did not possess the laws, it was terrifying. At the same time, he also realized how earth-shattering it was to have his 9 ancient stars upgraded into Tao stars. The Tao of green plants. As the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord roared, the mark formed by his body and the 2 mid-stage planets shone and poured towards Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli spoke calmly. As soon as he spoke, the threads around his body trembled violently. Even though they were formed by the self-detonation of the 4 planets, they were still trembling. They loosened their grip and were even suppressed. They floated around Wang Baoli. This scene caused the Heavenly Spirit Palm's expression to change drastically. However, before he could react, Wang Baoli had already raised his right hand. A cold glint appeared in his eyes as he pointed at the incoming light seal. White is the Tao of light. In an instant, the gigantic light seal grew dimmer the moment it neared. A large number of light spots dispersed and gathered in front of Wang Baoli's finger. It was as if wherever his finger was, it was like the source of all light. In the next instant, the finger that had absorbed all the light spots replaced everything else and became the only existence in the 4 galaxies. As the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord and the 2 mid-stage planets behind him were filled with disbelief and shock, Wang Baoli's finger landed in front of them. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, it's over. Chapter 981. Chapter 981 was accurate. He had used the Tao of Light to gather the Heavenly Spirit Seal's rules and use it to counter-suppress them. The instant this divine ability was unleashed from Wang Baoli's hands, the impact it had had on the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord and the others could be said to be earth-shattering. He could accept the fact that Wang Baoli had a powerful cultivator from the star domain as his master. He could accept the fact that Wang Baoli had made a breakthrough in his cultivation upon his return. He could also accept how powerful the human Tao star before him had become after fusing with it. However, he could not accept that the rules that he had put in all his effort to form were actually too exaggerated to describe as being unable to withstand a single blow in front of the other party. Is the gap between an immortal star and a Tao star really that big? The Heavenly Spirit Palm Master laughed bitterly, an intense look of unwillingness appeared in his eyes. Although he had never seen cultivators of the same realm on a Tao star in his life, it was not as if he had never fought a cultivator of the same realm on a special planet before. Although he was not a match for the other party, he was still able to barely fight the other party with his dense cultivation base. But now, he suddenly realized that he had been wrong. He had been extremely wrong. The suppression of the Tao planet against the immortal planet meant that his so-called powerful cultivation was nothing more than a joke. In front of the rules, everything seemed insignificant. There was no doubt that Wang Baoli had grasped so many rules that the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord felt like he was on the verge of breaking down. However, he was a late-stage cultivator of the planet, and he hadn't inherited his status as the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord, he had gained it through brutal slaughter. That was why he was extremely experienced in combat. The moment Wang Baoli pointed in the opposite direction, the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord's eyes were filled with madness. He spread his hands out and grabbed the two mid-stage planets beside him, the two of them were pale and shocked. The Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord unleashed his full power and pushed the two of them toward Wang Baoli's incoming fingers. Palm Lord, you! Palm Lord! Everything happened too quickly. With Wang Baoli's finger closing in, the difference between the mid-stage and late-stage planets, and the difference between the immortal planet and the spirit planet, the two mid-stage planets were unable to fight back. As they roared in anger, they couldn't help but pounce towards Wang Baoli. The instant they pounced, a destructive aura erupted from their bodies. It wasn't that they wanted to self-destruct, but that the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord didn't just push them forward. The influx of his cultivation caused the already chaotic cultivation of his two kinsmen to be ignited. They couldn't control the ripples of self-destruction. In the next instant, when they collided with Wang Baoli's descending finger of light, a loud boom reverberated in the air. The bodies of the two mid-stage cultivators who had exhausted their potential and been set ablaze instantly exploded. Their planets also shattered in that instant, turning into a destructive force that exploded crazily in front of Wang Baoli. From afar, the self-destruction of the two planets was even more powerful than the destruction of the planets. They turned into two huge maelstroms of flesh and blood, drowning Wang Baoli within. However, this scene did not make the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord heave a sigh of relief. He was still nervous. The danger of life and death grew even more intense. With the help of the self-destruction of the two mid-stage planets, he retreated abruptly. In that instant, his entire body was covered in a blood-red glow. It was obvious that he had activated a mystic technique and was trying to escape at top speed at all costs. His speed was so fast that it was visible to the naked eye just a breath ago. However, in the next instant, he had disappeared without a trace. The only things left on the battlefield were the two blood and flesh vortexes. As they continued to rumble, they spread out in all directions, as if they wanted to destroy everything in this place. However, they couldn't destroy Wang Baoli. At that moment, Wang Baoli was no longer a clone. He had fused with his original body and possessed a real physical body. His physical body was already powerful to begin with, and as a result of the fusion, his physical strength had improved. He had now reached the level of a physical planet. Coupled with the transformation of the Emperor armor, he didn't dodge at all. He walked out of the two flesh vortexes step by step. His long hair danced in the wind. Dressed in black, Wang Baoli turned his head to look in the direction where the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord had fled. Then, he turned his head and looked in another direction, his expression calm. Only these two are left. As he muttered to himself, Wang Baoli raised his right hand and grabbed at the air. He spoke calmly. Yellow Flame Dao. As soon as he spoke, the starry sky around him rumbled. The sea of fire left behind by the blazing flame ancestor, which enveloped the entire God's Eye civilization, instantly surged. It was as if at that moment, Wang Baoli had used his ancient star flame Tao. Fuse his own will into the sea of fire around him and control it. If it had been the flames unleashed by a mighty figure from another galaxy, even if Wang Baoli possessed the ancient star laws, it would have been nearly impossible for him to shake it. After all, the difference between them was too great. However, the blazing flame ancestor's recognition of him made all the difference. The sea of fire that had remained in the Divine Eye civilization didn't reject Wang Baoli. Instead, it was filled with passion. In the blink of an eye, the Divine Eye civilization erupted according to his divine thoughts. It rose from the edges of the surrounding area, it swept towards Wang Baoli with a force that could topple mountains and overturn seas. If one could stand at a high enough position and look down, one could clearly see the sea of fire that was filled with the God's Eye civilization. It was like a giant ring of fire. The ring of fire was shrinking rapidly, and everything within it, as long as one didn't have Wang Baoli's permission, they wouldn't be able to charge out of the ring of fire. They could only retreat continuously as the flames churned. The speed of the retreat was extremely fast. The entire process took about 10 breaths of time. As Wang Baoli raised his hand, two pathetic figures appeared on his left and right. They were forced back by the shrinking sea of flames, they were forced back. On the left was the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord, and on the right was the Heaven Palm Ancestor. Both of them had looks of despair on their faces. The sense of powerlessness that came from the bottom of their hearts made them laugh bitterly. However, compared to the Heaven Palm Ancestor, the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord was clearly more furious. After being forced out, he glared at Wang Baoli and roared. "Wang Baoli, kill him as soon as possible." But Wang Baoli's cold voice was the response. The figure that appeared in front of the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord in an instant and Wang Baoli's right index finger. However, the moment his index finger was pointed out, it was no longer flesh and blood. Instead, it turned into paper. It was the paper rules that the Tao Star had imprinted on it. As it landed, Wang Baoli's strange voice echoed in the Heavenly Spirit Palm Lord's ears. Paper armament art. This art was a meteorite divine ability that Wang Baoli had bought when he had left the meteorite lands. It was powerful, and with sufficient rules, it could turn everything into paper. It was like a seal, but also like a puppet. In the next instant, when Wang Baoli's finger touched the Heavenly Spirit Palm's forehead, the Heavenly Spirit Palm, who was unable to fight back under the suppression of the mighty figure's flames and Wang Baoli's Tao Star, shuddered, the expression on his face froze. He forced himself to lower his head, and what he saw was his own body, which was turning into paper that could be seen with the naked eye. The entire process took only 7 to 8 breaths. Eventually, the trembling Sky Palm Elder witnessed it with his own eyes. He saw the Heavenly Spirit Palm Elder turn into a paper figurine and shrink rapidly, turning into the size of a palm. He landed in Wang Baoli's hand and kept it. This scene made the Sky Palm Elder's scalp tingle. He was shocked to the extreme. He saw Wang Baoli turn around and stare at him. The moment their eyes met, Wang Baoli raised his right hand and pointed. Instantly, a white light that contained the rules of paper approached the Sky Palm Elder. The moment the white light approached, the Sky Palm Elder knelt down without hesitation. At that moment, he didn't care about his status, his cultivation, or anything else. He only cared about life and death. He spoke quickly. "I am willing to be your slave, and I will never betray you." The moment he said that, Wang Baoli's paper law beam paused in front of the Sky Palm Elder's forehead. Wang Baoli fell silent as well, as if he was deep in thought. The entire process took about 10 breaths. To the Sky Palm Elder, these 10 breaths were long and endless. It made him feel extremely tormented. His body trembled even more. Just as he was feeling anxious and desperate, as if he could no longer control himself, he finally heard a voice that, to him, was like the sound of nature, filled with hope. "Approved." As the voice reverberated, the beam of light in front of him changed abruptly, eventually turning into a mark that contained the will of the Tao Star. It was instantly imprinted between the Sky Palm Elder's brows. From then on, all of his thoughts, all of his life and death, were in Wang Baoli's hands. Due to the will of the Tao star, the mark was recognized by the laws of the starry skies. Unless someone from the same Tao star could suppress Wang Baoli, only then could it be forcefully erased. Otherwise, it would exist forever. Was the delay that serious? Chapter 982. Chapter 982, Return. After leaving the mark between the Heaven Palm Elder's brows, Wang Baoli turned his head and looked at the entire God's Eye civilization. His eyes were deep in thought. His silence caused the entire God's Eye civilization to be filled with a sense of oppression. The Heaven Palm Elder behind him was even more so. Even though he had managed to survive and knew that his life wouldn't be in danger for a short period of time, when faced with Wang Baoli who had fallen silent, the Heaven Palm Elder's heart was filled with more fear than bitterness. On one hand, he was afraid of Wang Baoli's background. On the other hand, he was afraid of the changes in his abilities. The entire galaxy was silent. All the cultivators from the Purple Gold civilization had basically been wiped out. As for the native cultivators from the Divine Eye civilization, they were mostly scattered across the stars. Many of them felt the terror of the battle in the galaxy and were shaken. Fairy Lingyu and the others, the people Wang Baoli was familiar with in the Sky Palm sect, were like that. They were all anxious and uncertain about the future. They knew very well that the Divine Eye civilization had reached its end. The three great sects that had once existed in name were now practically dead. There was only one planet left from the three great planets, and the royal family, which had been able to survive, had also disappeared. This caused all the natives of the Divine Eye civilization to feel bitter and uncertain about their future. They couldn't blame Wang Baoli for all this. It could even be said that without Wang Baoli, the current Divine Eye civilization would have been even more tragic. Amidst the silence, the starry sky grew increasingly silent. After a long while, Wang Baoli retracted his gaze and spoke calmly to the Sky Palm Elder behind him. Tidy up the battlefield and appease all the surviving native creatures. Pass down the instructions. The God's Eye civilization will not disappear, but it will welcome a new life. 1 month later, I will relocate the entire God's Eye civilization and join the Earth Federation. Wang Baoli ignored the complicated emotions of the Sky Palm Elder. Instead, in a flash, he shattered the bubble that had trapped Zhao Yameng, the donkey, and Xiao Wu. He carried them and took a step forward, disappearing from the spot. When he reappeared, he was already inside the Divine Eye Star. Migrating a civilization back to the solar system, and integrating it into the sun would increase the concentration of the spirit qi in the entire Federation. At the same time, it would also greatly increase the level of the Federation. This was the way to upgrade a civilization. It was also the decision that Wang Baoli had made in his heart. This process wouldn't cause any life or death damage to the Divine Eye civilization. It was just that from then on, they would have a master-subordinate relationship. After integrating into the solar system's star, all the past and future life forms born within the Divine Eye civilization. They would be closely connected to the solar system throughout their lives. They couldn't be betrayed. This price might seem cruel and could be considered a form of attachment, but it was still better than being enslaved by the Purple Gold civilization. At the very least, Wang Baoli was there. As the first civilization to join the solar system, their status might not seem high, but they still had a certain level of dignity. Furthermore, according to Wang Baoli's thoughts, if there was a chance, he would allow more civilizations to join the Federation. This would allow the Federation's level of civilization to increase again and again. This would not only bring great benefits to the Federation, but it would also bring great benefits to all the lives born in the Federation. The most basic thing was the increase in cultivation. Once the fusion was successful, then, all the Federation cultivators, including Wang Baoli, would instantly receive a gift from the advancement of the level of civilization. Their cultivation would increase to a greater or lesser extent. Now, all the conditions for migration had been met. However, to migrate a civilization, even with Wang Baoli's current cultivation level, he still needed to make some preparations in order to ensure that everything would go smoothly. Therefore, while the Sky Palm Elder arranged for the outside world to be reorganized, Wang Baoli, who had appeared in the Divine Eye Star, sat down cross-legged. He spread out his spiritual perception and merged it with the star, beginning to accumulate power. According to his judgment, the accumulation of power would reach its peak in about a month's time. When that time came, he would be able to begin his migration, instantly sending the entire Divine Eye civilization into the solar system. While he was accumulating power, Wang Baoli's clone also condensed once again from his original body. Even though the fusion of the clone and his original body would make the accumulation of power faster, the main source of power came from the Divine Eye star. Therefore, even if the gathering of strength was faster, it wouldn't be much faster. Furthermore, Wang Baoli had already left the Federation for too long. He needed to make a trip back first and make some preparations in the solar system so that there wouldn't be any accidents during the fusion. Therefore, Wang Baoli planned to let his clone return first. Before he returned, he had a discussion with the awakened Zhao Yameng. Zhao Yameng didn't choose to follow Wang Baoli's clone back to the Federation. Instead, she chose to temporarily stay in the Divine Eye civilization. That was because she had suggested to Wang Baoli that since the God's Eye civilization was to belong to the Federation completely, other than the merger of the stars, there was also a place for the heart. Baoli, I suggest that you ascend to the throne in the God's Eye civilization and become the new Divine Emperor. That is the only way you can gain the full approval of the God's Eye civilization. It will also allow them to be more loyal after they merge with the solar system, and there won't be too much of a panic. Wang Baoli thought for a moment and nodded in response to Zhao Yameng's suggestion. He didn't need to be involved in this matter. Zhao Yameng's purpose in staying behind was to help Wang Baoli successfully integrate all the cultivators of the Divine Eye civilization. With the cooperation of the Sky Palm Elder and Zhao Yameng's skill, this wasn't difficult. What Wang Baoli needed to do was to send a projection to carry out the ascension ceremony when he was needed. All of this had to be completed within a month. After that, Zhao Yameng would return to the solar system with the Divine Eye civilization through the stellar transference. The donkey and Xiaowu didn't return immediately either. They stayed behind to complete the task with Zhao Yameng. After a discussion, Wang Baoli thought about it and confirmed that there were no hidden dangers. After all, his original body was in the Divine Eye star. If there were any other changes, he could wake up at any time. He could rely on the Stellar Eye to bring his clone back in an instant. After making his decision, Wang Baoli and Zhao Yameng discussed the details. Finally, under the glow of the Star Eye, the Sea of Light covered the entire Divine Eye civilization. Wang Baoli's clone left the Divine Eye civilization. As the power of the star exploded and was sent out, ripples appeared out of thin air in the space outside the solar system. They formed rings of light that spread out in all directions. Wang Baoli's figure gradually emerged from the blurry outline. He slowly transformed from an illusion into a solid form. The entire process lasted for about an hour. It was only when the surrounding transmission rings slowly dimmed that Wang Baoli's silhouette truly appeared. The reason why it took so long was because the distance was too far. This was also the reason why Wang Baoli had to return first to make preparations. After all, migrating a civilization would take even longer, and if there was any interference in the process, there would be some backlash. His clone was fine. If anything really happened, he could just disperse. It might affect his original body, but it wouldn't be too much. However, if there was a backlash during the civilization migration, it would be a huge loss. As the teleportation ended, Wang Baoli slowly opened his eyes. As he looked around, the cultivation of the planet exploded within his body. It came from the familiar starry sky around him, stirring up waves in his previously calm heart. Finally. I'm back, Wang Baoli muttered. He had been away for decades, and he missed his hometown very much. He missed his parents even more. However, as he embarked on this path of cultivation, many things were beyond his control. At that moment, he felt as if he was afraid of his hometown. Wang Baoli felt a little uneasy. He stood outside the solar system for a long while before his body swayed and he flew towards the solar system. His speed wasn't fast at first, but as he flew, as his mood fluctuated, it became faster and faster. In the end, his entire body turned into a long rainbow that seemed to be able to tear apart the starry sky. In the next instant, he passed through the invisible barrier set up by the Federation outside the solar system and appeared directly within the solar system. Earth, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter. The moment he stepped into the solar system, a happy smile appeared on Wang Baoli's face. He could not help but spread out his divine perception and saw the familiar stars. He also saw the sun at its core and the ancient green bronze sword that was inserted into the sun. However, in the next instant, the smile that appeared on Wang Baoli's face froze. That was because the glow of the sun seemed to be something wrong. Something's wrong? Wang Baoli's expression changed, and his heart skipped a beat. Chapter 983. Chapter 983, Chapter 983, Anger. There was something wrong with the glow of the sun in the solar system. To be more precise, it was brighter than when Wang Baoli had left. There was also a faint halo of light outside. This halo was different from the normal halo of the sun. It could only be seen when one's cultivation had reached the planet. It was impossible to see anything below the planet. At that moment, the circle of light was clearly visible to Wang Baoli. At the same time, he saw the source of the circle. It was the ancient bronze sword. To be precise, it was at the tip of the sword. There was an aura that was using a special method to pull the sun. On one hand, it was slowly absorbing the power of the sun. On the other hand, it was an indirect influence, causing the sun in the solar system to slowly die. The reason why it was getting brighter was that it was like a last ray of light. Even though it hadn't reached the state of death yet, based on this process, it was estimated that in another 1,000 years, the sun in the solar system would be completely extinguished. This scene caused Wang Baoli's expression to change. At the same time, he couldn't tell whether what he was seeing was something that had appeared after he had left, or something that had happened before he had left. It was just that his cultivation wasn't high enough. That was why he hadn't noticed it. Regardless, Wang Baoli could still sense the planet's fluctuations from the aura emanating from the tip of the sword. This allowed him to be certain of one thing, that something had happened at the spot where the mighty cultivator from the vast expanse Dao Palace was sleeping. Something must have happened. Using the stars of my solar system to heal my injuries, Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes. He didn't act rashly. After all, as his cultivation increased, his understanding of what had happened in the vast expanse Dao Palace grew deeper. At the same time, he needed to find out if there had been any changes in the Federation recently. If there hadn't been any changes, it meant that the sun had been like this before he had left. It was just that he hadn't noticed it. However, if there had been any changes in the Federation, it was more likely that it had happened recently. The former and the latter would cause him to have two different attitudes towards the vast expanse Dao Palace. Therefore, after making a decision, Wang Baoli immediately spread out his consciousness and enveloped Earth. However, in the next instant, Wang Baoli's expression changed again. His consciousness was hidden, so no one could detect his existence. However, in his consciousness, as his consciousness swept across, everything on Earth was clearly visible. He didn't find Du and Muke's aura, nor did he find the aura of the ethereal sect's Grand Supreme Elder. There wasn't even the aura of Lin Yu or anyone he was familiar with. Wang Baoli was shaken. He looked towards Ethereal City. There the Ethereal Dao College had disappeared. The lake that had once been there seemed to have experienced the flames of war. It had turned into a deep pit, and one could see it. There was a giant handprint. It was as if a giant hand had descended from the sky and flattened all the islands in Ethereal Dao College. What made Wang Baoli tremble even more was that he couldn't find any trace of his parents' aura in Ethereal City, or even in all the regions on Earth. He could only see traces of the divine abilities left behind in many regions on Earth. There was also no smile on anyone's face. There was a deep sense of exhaustion on everyone's faces. All of this made Wang Baoli feel a strong sense of unease. After experiencing the massacre within the God's Eye civilization, the killing intent that he had managed to calm down with great difficulty surged in his heart once again. He didn't hesitate at all. His divine perception spread out instantly. It spread out from Earth and swept across the entire solar system. Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and other planets flashed across his divine perception instantly. It was a barren land. Just as Wang Baoli was about to lose control of his killing intent and anxiety, and he was about to explode from his trembling body, his mind covered Mars. There, he sensed a large number of familiar presences, which caused his body to tremble. He didn't bother with the rest of the presences. Instead, he focused all his attention on the presences of the two people in a house in his new Martian city. The moment he saw the two of them, the killing intent in Wang Baoli's body instantly subsided, and his eyes softened. They were his parents. In the small house, he saw his father. His hair was mostly white, and he was sitting there looking at the distant sky. It was unknown what he was thinking about, but beside him, leaning on his shoulder, it was Wang Baoli's mother. She was clearly much older, and there were some wrinkles on her face. At that moment, she was lowering her head and coughing incessantly as she looked at the photo in her hand. In the photo, there was a little fatty with both hands raised high, his index and middle fingers stretched out. He was in a victorious posture. The little fatty's body was round, and his eyes were like slits. A smug smile appeared on his face. This scene was filled with longing. Wang Baoli fell silent and felt guilty. He noticed his mother coughing occasionally, and he noticed the confusion in his father's eyes. "Dad." "Mom," Wang Baoli mumbled. His body, which was in the starry skies, disappeared instantly. In the next moment, in the house in the new Martian city, behind his parents, Wang Baoli appeared instantly. The moment he appeared, he knelt down. The moment his voice was heard, his parents, who were in front of him, trembled violently. They turned their heads slowly and saw their son, whom they missed. However, everything happened too suddenly. They seemed to be unable to believe that what they saw was real. As their bodies trembled, the photo in Wang Baoli's mother's hands fell to the ground. "Baoli?" "Dad, Mom, I'm back," Wang Baoli said softly. Even though his appearance had changed, his parents still recognized him at a glance. His mother hugged him, and tears streamed down her face unknowingly. She was unable to speak for a long while. Patting his mother's back gently, Wang Baoli listened to his mother's words, which were filled with longing and crying. Wang Baoli felt even more guilty. At the same time, he could not suppress the anger in his heart, which had reached its peak. However, in front of his parents, he hid his anger. He looked at his father, who was beside him and was filled with emotion and sorrow. Wang Baoli nodded gently. With the gentle comfort of his cultivation, gradually, his old mother fell asleep in his arms. He placed his mother gently on the bed and covered her with the blanket. Wang Baoli raised his head and looked at his father. He went up and hugged his father, who was at a loss. "Dad, tell me, who hurt my mother?" Even though he was already controlling those words, the anger that filled his heart caused the entire Mars to rumble. Everyone who lived on Mars couldn't help but be shocked. The reason why he was so angry was because, the moment he saw his mother, Wang Baoli had already noticed that his mother's body was extremely weak. It was obvious that her life foundation had been damaged, and she was at the stage where she was at the end of her life. Furthermore, there was still the fluctuation of a spell that had been forcefully sustained by someone else. Wang Baoli's father was clearly still in a state of agitation. Under Wang Baoli's comforting, it took him a long time to recover. Looking at his son, he finally could not control his tears. He held his hand and told him everything he knew after Wang Baoli had left. 3 years after Wang Baoli's departure, the situation on Earth had changed drastically. The 5-generation Sky Clan had once risen to power. The Zhou family and the Li family had taken the lead and changed the political situation in the solar system. Feng Churan had been forcibly detained, Li Xingwen had been severely injured, Du and Muke had died in battle, and all 4 Dao colleges had been destroyed. All the members of Du and Muke and Li Xingwen's lineage had lost their power. More than half of the council members had died in battle, and the rest had been severely injured. In the end, the Martian colony governor and his wife had managed to defend Mars with their newly created antimatter weapons. All those who had been severely injured during the changes in the situation had been relocated to Mars. While they were barely holding on, they had no choice but to bow down to the 5-generation Sky Clan and accept their rule in name. Wang Baoli's parents had been affected by the destruction of Ethereal Dao College. During the relocation, the Zhou family's hatred for Wang Baoli had prevented them from doing so. Li Xingwen and the others had eventually managed to send Wang Baoli's parents back safely. However, her mother had still been severely injured and had yet to recover. The reason for the change was all because a planet cultivator had awakened on the ancient green bronze sword. Chapter 984. Chapter 984, Attacking the Federation. Wang Baoli's father wasn't too clear about the other matters. What he knew and what he had told Wang Baoli weren't any secrets. They were modern history that most people in the Federation were aware of. As he listened to his father's words, the anger in Wang Baoli's heart surged. He hadn't planned to act rashly when he had sensed the changes in the ancient green bronze sword, but now, his thoughts had completely changed. And the 5-generation Sky Clan. The Zhou family, how dare you? The change in Wang Baoli's emotions once again triggered the rumbling of Mars. The cultivators on Mars were shocked and didn't know why. Wang Baoli looked at his father's white hair. He raised his right hand, and the power of essence spread out without form, fusing into his father's body. In an instant, the wrinkles on his father's face disappeared, and his hair recovered. Wang Baoli treated his injuries more carefully, and his mother, who was in a deep sleep, also recovered her black hair. From her appearance, it didn't matter if it was her age or her spirit energy, it was a visible change. Read on listnovel.com for faster updates. No one else in the Federation was able to resolve it. The only problem was that Wang Baoli could forcefully prolong their lives. It wasn't difficult for him to do so. All he needed to do was to use his own essence. He knew very well that he couldn't allow his parents to exist forever. However, what he could do was to make them healthy and live to the limit of their soul years. When that time came, would he be able to extend their lives? Wang Baoli didn't know about that, and he didn't want to think about it. What he was thinking about now was his parents' health and well-being. At the same time, the Zhou family and the 5-generation Sky Clan, who had almost caused the death of his parents, were nothing more than skeletons in his heart. That was why he condensed his clone into a figure. While he stayed here to accompany his parents, his clone had already left home. When it appeared, it was in a secret chamber deep underground in the Martian capital. An elder sat cross-legged in the secret chamber. He was thin and pale, and his face was clearly tired. There was a bulge on his neck, and it looked like a creature was squirming inside. Every time it squirmed, it would bring immense pain to the elder, causing his expression to distort. This elder was the ethereal Dao College's Grand Supreme Elder, Li Xingguan. Li Xingguan didn't notice Wang Baoli's appearance at all. He was trying his best to suppress his injuries, which had been with him for many years. He had to suppress his injuries every day for a fixed period of time. That was the only way. He could barely survive. It wasn't that he was afraid of death, but that he wasn't willing to leave just like that. That was why he persevered despite the immense pain he was in. He understood that he was a pillar of support for everyone on Mars. His existence meant that everyone on Mars still had hope. If he died, the senator, the governor, and all the other powerful cultivators of his generation, they would all lose hope. After all, he was the president who had created the Spirit Inception era. He had joined forces with his successor, Duan Muke, to push the Federation into an alliance. He had reached an unprecedented height. His prestige was more important than his cultivation. Duan Muke's death in battle, everyone's serious injuries, and Feng Churan's imprisonment had placed an even heavier burden on him. Even so, he still went to treat Wang Baoli's mother regularly. It wasn't because he knew that Wang Baoli had become a planet. It was because in his heart, Wang Baoli and the other people involved in the Dark Swallow plan were the hope of the Federation. Wang Baoli looked at Li Xingguan, who had a pained expression on his face. His eyes were filled with respect and gratitude, and he felt even more apologetic. He instantly raised his right hand and pointed at the bulge on Li Xingguan's neck. The bulge trembled under his finger, and there seemed to be a cry for mercy coming from within. In that instant, the bulge shattered, and a black thread worm flew out rapidly from within. It seemed like it was about to leave, but what awaited it was the frozen look in Wang Baoli's eyes, as well as ashes and smoke. As it shattered, Li Xingguan's body trembled. He opened his eyes in a daze, and he immediately saw Wang Baoli before him. His expression changed at first, but after a careful examination, his expression changed to one of excitement and disbelief. Baoli? Your disciple greets the Grand Supreme Elder. Wang Baoli cupped his fists and bowed deeply. At the same time, he released his origin energy and infused it into Li Xingguan's body, causing his injuries to recover rapidly in an instant. The entire process took 3 to 5 breaths. Li Xingguan's skinny body returned to normal. At that moment, his cultivation erupted. He was no longer in the nascent soul realm, but in the imminent deity realm. This was not Wang Baoli's help. As the first batch of cultivators from the Earth Spirit Inception era, Li Xingwen was naturally talented. Due to the level of civilization, it seemed difficult for him to advance. However, after Wang Baoli left, he had relied on himself to achieve a breakthrough, and he had advanced to the Spirit Ascension realm. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Li Xingwen didn't care about his recovery. In his excitement, he looked carefully at Wang Baoli. The joy in his eyes made Wang Baoli feel even more guilty. He felt that he had come back too late. If he had come back earlier, the situation might not have turned out this way. Therefore, after paying his respects, Wang Baoli immediately asked about the details of the changes in the Earth's structure that he hadn't gotten from his father. With Li Xingwen's words, Wang Baoli finally gained a detailed understanding of the changes in the Earth's structure. To the solar system and the Federation civilization. The existence of the planet cultivators who had awakened from the ancient bronze sword was terrifying enough to cause a tremendous change. In the entire civilization, it would be easy for them to wipe out the Federation in the starry skies. As for the awakened one, although he did not wipe out the Federation at that time, he was not a gentle person like Feng Churan. Instead, he strongly advocated using the solar system to restore the glory of the vast expanse Dao Palace. Hence, he was very dissatisfied with the alliance between Feng Churan and the Federation. Hence, when he went out with the ancient bronze sword, he directly captured Feng Churan and the other disciples of the vast expanse Dao Palace and imprisoned them in the vast expanse Dao Palace. At the same time, he took over Feng Churan's authority, forcing the disciples of the vast expanse Dao Palace to have no choice but to obey. He even personally killed Duan Muk to establish his authority. However, due to the fact that he had not fully recovered from his injuries, after he had done all this, he supported the 5-generation Sky Clan, who had voluntarily submitted to him. He made them the new authority figures of the Federation, acting as puppets of the vast expanse Dao Palace to carry out his will. The 5-generation Sky Clan was already extremely displeased with Duan Muk and Li Xingwen. Hence, under their leadership and with the support of that planet mighty figure, they began a bloodbath. The March group was plundered, the Jin family patriarch perished, and all 4 Dao colleges were wiped out. Other than the ethereal Dao College, which had more than half of its disciples relocated to Mars, almost all of the other 3 Dao colleges were wiped out. There was also the Council of Representatives. 9 of them died in battle, and the rest either surrendered or fled to Mars. Among them, the council member was severely injured, and his cultivation base had also dropped drastically. He was now a mortal. As for Lin Yu, he rose to prominence in this battle. His cultivation base had broken through to the spirit realm, and with the cooperation of the Martian colony governor and Li Xingwen, he had migrated to Mars. In addition, the stellar sources of Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus had all been extracted and used by the vast expanse Dao Palace to treat their injuries. The Star Sun had also, with the help of the 5-generation Sky Clan, followed the request of the planet mighty figure. A large number of array formations were set up, making it the source of power for the vast expanse Dao Palace to recover. As for Mars, when everyone had fled to this place to defend, they had originally been unable to fight against the planet mighty figure behind the 5-generation Sky Clan. However, after he had arrived and looked at Mars from afar, he was just about to make his move. There seemed to be ripples spreading out from the Martian soil, causing the planet mighty figure to be a little apprehensive. That was why Mars had managed to hold on until now. It's a dark artifact. Wang Baoli heard everything, and the coldness in his eyes grew stronger. He spoke slowly. That's my guess. That's what happened. Baoli, the current Federation, is what happened. What are you going to do next? As Li Xingwen said that, his eyes lit up. He looked at Wang Baoli. He had already sensed it, the Dao College disciple before him had an unfathomable cultivation. In his opinion, he seemed to be even more powerful than the planet he had seen before. What should I do? Wang Baoli's eyes flashed with killing intent. One punishment for each and every one of you is to pay the price for your wrongdoings. Those who hurt my family and friends will pay with their lives. As for the vast expanse Dao Palace that lives in the solar system, it's fine if they don't pay the rent, but they still dare to do this. I will let them know that the owner of this place is angry. Wang Baoli said calmly. He spoke softly to the masked little Missy, who was standing in front of him. Little Missy, the vast expanse Dao Palace is at fault in this matter. Don't blame me. As he spoke, Wang Baoli took a step forward and disappeared from Mars. When he reappeared, he was in the starry skies beyond Earth. He took a step towards Earth, filled with killing intent. Chapter 985. Chapter 985, Chapter 985, Crimson Star Rebirth. The moment Wang Baoli stepped onto Earth, a soft sigh reverberated in his mind. It was little Missy's voice, but it was only a sigh. There were no other words. It was obvious that even little Missy, who had sensed everything through Wang Baoli's doppelganger, found it inappropriate to speak up for the vast expanse Dao Palace. Wang Baoli didn't respond to the sigh either. He looked calm, however, the anger in his heart had already boiled over. On one hand, it came from the experiences of his friends and acquaintances. More importantly, it came from his parents. This was where Wang Baoli's reverse scale was located. At the same time, due to the guilt in his heart, he felt that he needed a place to vent his anger. That was why his figure instantly descended upon Earth, when he appeared. It was the Earth Federation's presidential palace. The place where Duan Muke had once been was now ruled by the 5-generation Sky Clan after Duan Muke's death and the departure of Li Xingwen, and the others. Compared to the past, it was obvious that the defensive array formation here was much stronger. On one hand, the 100 or so statues in the square were becoming more lifelike. They also contained extraordinary spirit chi fluctuations. It was as if these statues, which were refined based on legends and myths, could be revived and returned at any time. However, the original statues of Li Xingwen and Duan Muke had disappeared. They had been replaced by the statues of the 5-generation Sky Clan's family head. There was also a layer of invisible light screen outside the presidential palace that cultivators could sense. This light screen formed a protective barrier. The source of the light screen was the divine weapon inside the presidential palace. As a divine weapon that only the president could control, the scarlet flying knife in Duan Muke's hands had been taken over by the 5-generation Sky Clan after his death. It had been branded and continuously worshipped in the presidential palace. As the figure appeared, Wang Baoli stood in mid-air and lowered his head to look at the presidential palace below. Nothing could hide from his eyes. He saw the spirit chi attached to the hundreds of statues. He also saw the divine weapons being worshipped in the presidential palace, as well as the people coming and going in the area. More than half of them were from the 5-generation Sky Clan and were their clansmen. The person who had been elected president in the presidential palace was the head of the Chen clan, one of the 5-generation Sky Clan. His cultivation was also at the spirit realm. In the presidential palace, apart from him, there were 4 perfected nascent soul realm cultivators who were meditating deep underground. It was clear that after they had become affiliated with the planet that had awakened in the vast expanse Dao Palace, the 5-generation Sky Clan had gained considerable benefits in terms of their cultivation, as well as their power. However, they had been so pleased with themselves that they had suppressed all opposition. They hadn't truly realized that what they thought they had gained was nothing more than duckweed in the eyes of the true experts. Before I left that year, I should have been ruthless enough to wipe out the 5-generation Sky Clan, Wang Baoli said softly. He was muttering to himself, but his cultivation was too high and he hadn't been able to control it. That was why he was muttering to himself. It instantly turned into bolts of lightning that exploded in the presidential palace. To all the cultivators in the area, the sudden appearance of the voice, which was like a bolt of lightning, immediately caused their minds to rumble. They were completely unable to resist it. It was as if they were facing the might of the heavens, and they all spat out blood. Those who didn't have the bloodline of the 5-generation Sky Clan might have coughed up blood and lost consciousness in an instant, but their lives weren't in danger. However, those with the bloodline of the 5-generation Sky Clan wouldn't be spared. There might be innocent people in the 5-generation Sky Clan, but Wang Baoli wasn't a saint. He couldn't search each and every one of their souls to see who was good and who was bad. He could only scan them with his divine sense, causing the 5-generation Sky Clan bloodline cultivators to. Blood flowed out of their 7 orifices and they fell one by one in an instant. Whether they lived or died depended on their own fate. As the 5-generation Sky Clan's bloodline cultivators fell one by one, the president of the Chen family clan's face changed drastically. The 4 perfected nascent soul realm 5-generation Sky Clan elders in the depths of the underground were also shocked. They were the first to be activated. There were more than 100 statues in the square. These statues were clearly enhanced by the power of the planets. It was obvious that the planet cultivator who had awakened on the ancient green bronze sword had used this technique before. However, his strength wasn't even fully recovered, let alone his injuries. Even if he had fully recovered, in the end, he wasn't a match for Wang Baoli. There was no need to even mention this external object that he had just used. Therefore, in the blink of an eye, the more than 100 statues opened their eyes at the same time. Each of them released a wave of aura, as if they had been resurrected and were about to soar into the sky to fight against Wang Baoli. However, in the blink of an eye, Wang Baoli raised his right hand slightly and pressed down. Instantly, a seemingly supreme power erupted without warning. It seemed to have transformed into a gigantic, invisible palm print. As it pressed down, the heavens and earth changed instantly. The winds and clouds swirled, and the 100+ statues that had just woken up, they trembled in unison. Their opened eyes closed, and their bodies trembled as they knelt down towards Wang Baoli, who was standing in the sky. As they knelt, the 5-generation Sky Clan's family head statue shattered. The invisible barrier formed by the divine weapons outside the presidential palace could not withstand the force and shattered in an instant. As the mirror shattered, the presidential palace collapsed with a loud crash. A crimson rainbow with a sharp intent soared into the sky and charged towards Wang Baoli, as if it wanted to pierce through him. However, its speed became slower and slower until it reached Wang Baoli. The crimson streak of light came to a complete halt. It trembled visibly in front of Wang Baoli, revealing its true form. It was a crimson flying dagger. It was the Federation President's divine weapon. At the same time, as the crimson dagger trembled, the head of the Chen family rushed out of the collapsed presidential palace, trembling. The 4 perfected nascent soul realm cultivators behind him flew out in fear, all of them looking at Wang Baoli in the sky. "Senior, please calm down. Everything is my fault. No matter what request you have, as long as the Federation civilization can fulfill it, I will definitely fulfill it." The head of the Chen family's trembling heart turned into intense fear. He didn't recognize Wang Baoli immediately. His first reaction was that he had either arrived from outer space, or he was someone who had just woken up in the vast expanse Dao Palace. That was why he didn't ask what was going on. He went to apologize first. As he spoke, he immediately knelt down, as did the 4 nascent souls behind him. Wang Baoli glanced at the spineless Chen family head and thought of Du and Nuke. Compared to him, the dog-like Chen family head wasn't even worthy of being the president. Wang Baoli sighed softly in his heart at the thought of Du and Nuke. He looked at the trembling scarlet flying knife and said calmly, "Since you are a sentient being, why are you helping the wicked?" When the red flying knife heard those words, it trembled even more violently. A sense of unwillingness, grievance, and grief could be faintly felt from within the blade. Wang Baoli felt the emotions of the red flying knife and fell silent. He had some understanding. This divine armament was a special item for the Federation President, and it had an agreement with the Federation. It had always adhered to this agreement. Whoever was the president, it belonged to whoever. Du and Nuke's death had made it sad and angry. However, in the face of that agreement and under the gaze of the planet's Almighty, it had no choice but to comply. "Go and cleanse the stain on your body." Wang Baoli shook his head. 1 Spirit Mastery Realm Cultivator and 4 Nascent Soul Realm Cultivators were dirty hands to him. He had turned around after finishing his sentence. He walked towards the gathering place of the 5-generation Sky Clan, which was marked with his supernatural awareness. The instant he turned around, the scarlet flying knife suddenly erupted with a dazzling light. Its killing intent was even more intense. It instantly turned into a scarlet rainbow and charged towards the ground. The clan head of the Chen clan was shocked, and the 4 nascent soul realm cultivators were in disbelief. The scarlet glow whizzed past the 4 nascent soul realm cultivators. Instantly, the 4 nascent soul realm cultivators' heads flew into the air. As their nascent souls were destroyed, the Chen family head's scalp went numb as he watched the crimson flying knife fly past him once again. He was so terrified that he went mad. He turned towards Wang Baoli, who was about to leave in the sky. He screamed hoarsely, "Senior, what did I do wrong?" Before he could finish his sentence, the crimson beam exploded even more violently. As it charged forward, the blade shattered into dozens of pieces. It was the price he had to pay. It unleashed an astonishing power. No matter how much the patriarch of the Chen family tried to resist, he was unable to escape. It pierced through his chest. As the patriarch of the Chen family screamed in pain, his body and soul were destroyed. Dozens of flying knife fragments flew out from his corpse. They carried the aura of a divine armament that seemed to be on the verge of dissipating. The fragments flew up into the air with great difficulty amidst the darkness. They caught up to Wang Baoli and floated in front of him. They were once again pieced together into flying knives. However, the cracks and the signs of death made it obvious to everyone that they were about to dissipate. From now on, your mission is no longer just to listen to the president, but also to protect my family. As for now, follow me first. Wang Baoli said softly. He raised his right hand and waved it. An aura that belonged to his Tao star surged into the shattered divine armament Crimson Star. The flying saber shards trembled, and their bodies emitted a strong glow, as if they had been reborn. The cracks on the blade healed rapidly, and at the same time, there was an aura that was even stronger than before. It rose explosively from its body. Chapter 986. Chapter 986, Chapter 986, 5 Generations Extermination. Wang Baoli, who had made his own Tao oath and upgraded the 9 ancient planets to Tao stars, had the power of his oath contained within the aura of his Tao stars. To a certain extent, his words were like a seal that could be sealed. Even if the scarlet flying knife was a divine weapon, it could still be sealed. That was why his words had changed the agreement between the scarlet flying knife and the Federation. He had used his own power to make the scarlet flying knife condense once again. That was equivalent to giving the scarlet flying knife a stroke of good fortune, allowing it to remain a divine weapon despite its level. However, in terms of its power, it had some karmic ties with Wang Baoli, so it had indirectly borrowed the force to become stronger. After hearing Wang Baoli's words, the black and scarlet flying knife trembled. As its aura erupted, it seemed to respond. Then, with a flash, it turned into a scarlet hairpin and stuck into Wang Baoli's hair. His hair was also coiled up, making the now slender Wang Baoli look like an immortal. He didn't look at the collapsed presidential palace and the corpses on the ground. Instead, he stood in mid-air and walked into the distance. Behind him, in the ruins, people of the bloodline of the 4 great clans gradually stopped waking up. They looked at the ruins around them in a daze. They also saw Wang Baoli disappearing into the sky. At the same time, they saw the posture of more than 100 statues, which had changed from standing to kneeling. At that moment, it was the setting sun. The glow of dusk shone on Wang Baoli's body, seemingly forming a layer of multicolored robes. As he walked further and further away, it was unknown who was the first amongst the awakened cultivators to kneel and kowtow to Wang Baoli. Soon, all of the awakened cultivators, they all bowed in unison in awe. Wang Baoli walked further and further away. The gathering place of the 5-generation Sky Clan wasn't scattered. It was in a single place. It was different from what Wang Baoli had remembered. It had completely become a city. The city was so big that it had 3 ethereal cities. Other than the 5-generation Sky Clan, there were also cultivators from the Galactic Dusk Sect and the Plume Manifestation Carnate Sect. It was clear that the 2 sects from back then had been torn apart by the changes in the situation. A portion of them had followed Li Xingwen to Mars, while the rest had joined the 5-generation Sky Clan. However, to Wang Baoli, that wasn't important. When he appeared above the city of the 5-generation Sky Clan, the anger in his heart spread outwards, causing the sky to change color. It formed a majestic black cloud that enveloped the entire city. However, the appearance of the black cloud, and the suppressive force it exuded made it impossible for anyone in the city who wasn't of the 5-generation Sky Clan's bloodline to see or sense it. Only the 5-generation Sky Clan members, all of them watched in shock. At the same time, the scene that happened in the presidential palace was transmitted to the upper echelons of the 5-generation Sky Clan. The family head and elders of the 5-generation Sky Clan were all shocked. Waves of shock rose in their hearts. What the hell is going on? When did we offend such a mighty figure? Hurry up and report this to the seniors of the Tao Palace. The clan head and higher-ups of the 5-generation Sky Clan were all extremely shocked. They were all thrown into chaos. Wang Baoli, who was in mid-air, looked coldly at the people of the 5-generation Sky Clan in the city and said calmly, "Li, Li was the first member of the five-generation Sky clan. As soon as the words left his mouth, the Li clan's current clan head, as well as the elders from the other three clans, who were in the meeting hall of the five-generation Sky clan in the city, began to tremble violently, their eyes widened, and before they could say anything, their bodies shriveled like deflated rubber balls. Then, they turned into nothingness, as if they had been wiped out. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. They weren't the only ones. All the nascent soul realm cultivators, including the elders who had gone into seclusion in the Li family's restricted area, as well as the Grand Supreme Elder, had died instantly. In the end, Wang Baoli hadn't been too involved. That was why he had only taken the lives of the nascent soul realm cultivators. Even so, the heads and elders of the other four great families were still shocked beyond words, the fear in their eyes was indescribable. After all, they had watched as the family head and elders of the Chen family died mysteriously right before their eyes. "Senior, please spare us. Senior, the Li family's mistake has nothing to do with us. Senior, the five-generation Sky clan is dependent on Senior Deyunzi." The other four great clans rose into the air in fear. They knelt and begged Wang Baoli, who was standing at the center of the endless black clouds in the sky. Until now, they didn't know what they had done wrong, nor did they know Wang Baoli's identity. Only the Zhou family head, who was also Zhou Yifan and Zhou Yixian's father, looked at Wang Baoli. He vaguely felt that he looked familiar, but his heart trembled. He couldn't quickly find the source of the familiarity in his mind. As he instinctively tried to recall, Wang Baoli said his second surname. Chen. As soon as he said that, he flew into the air. The family head of the Chen family, as well as all the nascent soul realm elders in the four great clans, who were begging and kowtowing to Wang Baoli, trembled violently. Their eyes widened, and their bodies melted instantly, they were reduced to ashes. This scene was an intense stimulation for the Zhou family and the remaining families. They let out shrill cries at that moment, especially the family head of the Zhou family. As his body trembled, the sense of familiarity instantly spread, he finally found the source. His eyes widened, and he couldn't help but exclaim. You are Wang Baoli." As soon as the Zhou family head said that, the elders of his family clan and the people from the Zhu family were stunned. Disbelief appeared in their eyes. Even though Wang Baoli had already reached the spirit realm before he had left, and he was the first person to do so, however, it had only been a few years, and he had already reached such a terrifying level. This was something unimaginable to them. Wang Baoli. The Zhu family head's heart trembled. He was about to speak again as his breathing quickened. However, what awaited him were the words, Zhu, that Wang Baoli had said with a cold expression, as well as the surname Luoku, from the Western family clan of the five-generation Sky clan. In the next instant, the patriarch of the two families and all the elders of their families vanished into nothingness. They were all dead. As for the Zhou family, all the elders had gone mad, fleeing in all directions. Even though they knew that they couldn't escape, they still did so instinctively. Only the patriarch of the Zhou family laughed bitterly. The moment he recognized Wang Baoli, he knew that the Zhou family was finished. He had given the order to hunt down Wang Baoli's parents. He had done so to vent the anger that had accumulated in his heart. However, he had never expected that even though he had the support of a planet-based mighty figure, the incident would still happen at this very moment. It was the sound of the family's death knell. Why didn't the planet from the vast expanse Dao Palace come? I don't believe that he doesn't know what happened here, but why didn't he come? The Zhou family head roared in his heart. He smiled bitterly as he spoke quickly. Wang Baoli, for the sake of Yifan, I'm his father after all. Wang Baoli fell silent. He had asked Zhao Yaming about Zhou Yifan's whereabouts, but she didn't know either. As his figure appeared in his mind, Wang Baoli remained silent for a few breaths before speaking calmly. Zhou. As soon as he spoke, the Zhou family head's body trembled, and blood flowed out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. His hair turned white in an instant, and his cultivation fell from the great circle of the nascent soul realm to the core formation realm, then to the foundation establishment realm, and then to the foundation establishment realm. Then, he collapsed. When he became a mortal, blood spurted out of his mouth, and his body fell to the ground. Other than the Zhou family head, the elders who had scattered all over the place had all melted. It was as if they had never existed. "I'll leave your life for Yifan to take personally," Wang Baoli said calmly. He didn't bother with the Zhua family head whose cultivation had been crippled. Instead, he raised his head and looked up into the sky. The killing intent in his eyes didn't diminish. Instead, it became even colder. He spoke calmly. "Have you seen enough? Have you considered enough?" As Wang Baoli spoke, ripples suddenly appeared in the sky. They twisted and morphed. Then, countless threads appeared out of thin air and gathered together to form the figure of an elder. The elder's expression was unsightly. His eyes were sharp. He wore the Daoist robe of the vast Dao Palace and had 5 flying swords on his back that emitted sharp sword chi. He stared fixedly at Wang Baoli as he spoke slowly in a hoarse voice. "Young man, it's not easy to advance to a planet. I advise you not to be too arrogant. Otherwise, when you're suppressed, you'll definitely regret it." Chapter 987. Chapter 987, that was Chapter 987. The moment the Elder appeared, the scenes of Wang Baoli exterminating the 5-generation Sky Clan on Earth were transmitted to all the planets through the Array formation, in the solar system. It was as if all the cultivators and sentient beings on all the planets in the solar system were watching a live broadcast. Most of them saw everything. Read on listnovel.com for faster updates. To the people on Earth, the 5-generation Sky Clan's rule over the past few years had exhausted them. It was as if the entire Federation had been enslaved. They had to sacrifice everything for the recovery of the vast Dao Palace. Not only had the monastery been destroyed and abolished, making it impossible for people to obtain knowledge, but at the same time, their cultivation advancement had also been interrupted, making it difficult for them to obtain cultivation techniques. However, this was still nothing. The most unbearable thing was that after the 5-generation Sky Clan took over the government, they required everyone to hand over an extremely high amount of spirit stones within a fixed period of time. Once they were unable to complete it, they would be subjected to extremely cruel punishment. This life of enslaving all living beings as if they were absent from work was a huge boulder that weighed down on everyone. One could even imagine that if this continued, the Federation would be completely squeezed dry. To a certain extent, it could be said that they would have to pay with their lives, to pay for the recovery of the vast Dao Palace. Therefore, when they saw Wang Baoli's appearance and the destruction of the 5-generation Sky Clan, the excited voices of the people on the various planets immediately spread in all directions. This was especially true on Mars, where the governor and the others, they had already heard about Wang Baoli's return from Li Xingguan, and when they saw all of this, their hearts were filled with excitement. However, there was also worry and anxiety. This was especially so when the old man from the planet appeared. This anxiety reached its peak. Everyone looked over. On Earth, Wang Baoli, who was in midair above the city of the 5-generation Sky Clan, raised his head. He looked at the old man who had walked out from the sky. He could sense the fluctuations of the middle stage cultivation of the old man's planet. He could also sense that the old man's planet was at the spirit planet level. "Are you the one who gave the 5-generation Sky Clan the right to be arrogant?" Wang Baoli asked slowly. Everything about the elder couldn't be hidden under his Dao planet status. He could see everything clearly. On the other hand, in the elder's eyes, Wang Baoli's vision was blurry. This was also the reason why the elder hadn't appeared despite his arrival. He could only determine that Wang Baoli was a planet, but he didn't know the details. That was why he hadn't acted rashly. He had planned to see what the elder would do before making a decision. However, now that he had been discovered, the old man, as a planet, had a certain level of confidence despite his fear. That was why he spoke coldly after walking out. His words contained a hint of a lesson. His confidence stemmed from his confidence in his own cultivation, his reliance on the ancient green bronze sword, and his contempt for the aboriginal cultivators in the solar system. That was why Wang Baoli looked at him coldly. As he asked a question in return, the elder snorted coldly. "Young man, I am Yunzi of the vast expanse Dao Palace. I am a new planet like you, but my body is still in a state of emptiness. My essence, chi, and spirit are still unable to materialize into a physical cultivator. I have seen too many things in my life. Considering that your cultivation is not easy, if you can assist the vast expanse Dao Palace in its cultivation here, I can recommend you to join the vast expanse Dao Palace and become a guest elder. Now, it's up to you to decide whether you want to fight me or join the vast expanse Dao Palace. With that, De Yunzi lifted his right hand and performed an incantation gesture. Immediately, the 5 flying swords behind him began to shine with dazzling light. 5 streams of sword chi shot up into the sky and gathered above his head to form an illusory planet. The power of the planet instantly spread out, transforming into a mighty pressure that enveloped the entire Earth. From his point of view, this native planet before him must have had some fortuitous encounter. The planet that it had fused with had surpassed him and should be at the level of an immortal planet. This made him feel jealous, but at the same time, he snorted coldly in his heart. He thought to himself that the other party was obviously blessed and could not control an immortal planet. Otherwise, this seemingly corporeal but clearly illusory scene would not have occurred. In his mind, he did not consider the concept of the other party being a clone. From what he knew, the native before him had just advanced, and his body and planet were still in an unstable state. Such a person, even if he was on the immortal planet, if he went all out and used some trump cards, he would still have a certain degree of confidence in suppressing him. At the same time, he was very satisfied with his words pointing out everything. The hidden meaning was to tell the other party, don't think that just because you have advanced to a planet, you can be arrogant in front of me. It was also because of these judgments that his tone gradually became more and more forceful. His words reverberated in the air. His cultivation erupted, and sword chi surged. It was as if he was about to make a move at the slightest disagreement. Wang Baoli's expression didn't change in the slightest. He continued to stare coldly at the elder before him and spoke calmly. You're saying that I'm arrogant? You won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. The elder raised his eyebrows. He raised his right hand abruptly and descended toward Wang Baoli. He spoke calmly. Suppress! As soon as he spoke, the sword chi from the 5 flying swords behind him rose and gathered into a star. The light shone brightly, and an invisible pressure that was as vast as the ocean instantly gathered in all directions within his senses. It was as if it had formed an invisible hand that pressed down on Wang Baoli from above. Read on listnovel.com for faster updates. Not only was his cultivation at the mid-stage planet realm rampaging at this moment, but the power of the ancient bronze sword that he had borrowed also descended at this moment. It caused the stars in the solar system to flicker slightly, and the suppressive force instantly increased exponentially. The earth beneath Wang Baoli trembled under the loud boom, and the air around him began to show signs of shattering. However, to De Yunzi, the suppressive force felt like the ocean. To Wang Baoli, however, it was merely a gust of strong wind. It didn't even blow his hair up. To his body, it was completely unshakable. You said that I overestimated myself? Wang Baoli's expression remained calm as he spoke calmly. This scene immediately caused De Yunzi's eyes to widen. Shock appeared in his eyes, and he quickly formed a seal with his hands. He let out a low growl, and the 5 flying swords behind him immediately rose into the air and gathered in midair. The stars that emerged from them became more and more corporeal. At the same time, the suppressive force increased exponentially and pressed down on Wang Baoli once again. Not only that, the 5 flying swords also turned into 5 long arcs that charged toward Wang Baoli with a sharp whistling sound. With a loud boom, the suppressive force formed by the stars landed on Wang Baoli's body. This time, the force was clearly much stronger than before. It finally lifted Wang Baoli's hair a little, and the 5 flying swords turned into long arcs. They approached in an instant. However, the closer they got, the more they trembled. In the end, when they were 10 feet away from him, they trembled to the extreme, and the light dimmed rapidly. As Wang Baoli raised his right hand, the 5 flying swords flew into his hand instantly. They were extremely obedient, and at the same time, they turned into 5 rings that automatically circled around Wang Baoli's fingers. That's it? Wang Baoli said coldly. That's impossible. De Yunzi's mind buzzed, his expression changed completely. The scene before his eyes had exceeded his imagination, and he found it extremely unbelievable. His body instinctively wanted to retreat, but the moment he did so, a cold glint flashed in Wang Baoli's eyes. He took a step forward. He was so fast that he disappeared in an instant. Before De Yunzi could react, he appeared before him, raised his right hand, and threw a punch. With just one punch, the sky and earth changed color, and the wind and clouds shattered. Yunzi let out a shrill scream. Fresh blood spewed out of his mouth, and his body exploded with a loud bang. Even the illusory planet outside was not spared. As his body collapsed, it was torn into pieces and forcefully blasted apart. Only its soul, which was about to be torn apart, suddenly released a beam of light from the ancient bronze sword. It landed and surrounded it, pulling it rapidly, allowing Yunzi's soul to escape the calamity. With a shocked expression, it used the force to retreat rapidly. It flew out of Earth and, under the pull of the beam of light, headed straight for the ancient bronze sword. "Where can you escape to?" "Even this ancient bronze sword is in the Federation's territory," Wang Baoli said calmly. With a flash of his body, he gave chase. As he gave chase, everyone in the Federation, who had seen everything through the solar system array formation, felt their hearts thump. Their excitement exploded. Wang Baoli. The legend of our ethereal Tao College, the strongest head prefect since ancient times, Wang Baoli. The strongest person in the Federation, Wang Baoli. Chapter 988. Chapter 988, Chapter 988, Old Fart, who are you talking about? The entire Federation was excited. Many cultivators flew into the air and looked at the rainbow in the sky. Their hearts were stirred. As everyone watched the scene live through the solar system array formation, Wang Baoli was extremely fast. He rushed out of Earth in an instant and took a step into the starry sky. He chased after Yunzi, who was being pulled by the beam of light from the ancient bronze sword. Seeing that he was about to be caught, Yunzi, who was in the light beam, trembled. His eyes were filled with intense fear and shock, and he let out a shrill scream. "Senior brother, save me!" Almost at the same time as he said those words, as Wang Baoli's figure approached the light beam rapidly, a crack suddenly appeared in the void at the side. A large hand extended from the crack. It was illusory, however, it was extremely fast. It contained the power of a planet, and it surpassed Yunzi's. It wasn't a mid-stage planet, but a perfected planet. The moment it appeared, the large hand grabbed at Wang Baoli. "I was just thinking that there might not only be one person who woke up." Wang Baoli laughed coldly as the large hand grabbed at him. He raised his right hand and pointed, and a large amount of fog appeared out of thin air, in front of him turned into a huge finger. It is the cloud finger, toward the big hand with a bang. A loud noise reverberated in all directions. Amidst the loud noise, when Wang Baoli's cloud finger made contact with the large hand, violent waves were stirred up and spread out in all directions. From within the crack in the void, straight out of the shadows. The man did not look old, but middle-aged. His face was gloomy. The moment he walked out, he raised his hands and waved them. Instantly, stars appeared behind him. He formed a seal with his hands, a piece of talisman paper appeared in front of him. As soon as the paper appeared, it expanded rapidly and became bigger in an instant. It headed straight for Wang Baoli, where it was printed. At the same time, the light-beamed Yunzi, at this time also fiercely clenched his teeth, did not continue to escape, but rushed out from the light beam. Two-handed incantation issued a roar of the soul. Seal! As he formed a seal, an illusory talisman paper materialized in front of him. Together with his senior brother's talisman paper, it flew towards Wang Baoli's seal. Wang Baoli remained calm in the face of the duo's joint attack. However, he narrowed his eyes and ignored the two symbols. Instead, he turned around abruptly. As he swept his gaze towards the void behind him, he raised his right hand and pressed down hard. Immediately, the 9 ancient planets behind him roared and materialized. The 9 laws shone together, turning into 9 rays of light that shot straight towards the empty void. At the same time, Wang Baoli didn't hesitate at all. He exploded instantly, turning into a large amount of fog that spread rapidly in all directions. He tried to avoid the talismans from Yunzi and his senior brother. He wanted to leave the area as well. That was because at the spot where the 9 laws were attacking, an aura that shook his heart and soul was revealed. This aura, in Wang Baoli's senses, it was no longer something that a planet could possess, it was clearly the fluctuations of a star. This series of actions and reactions happened in the blink of an eye. Just as Wang Baoli's body turned into fog and spread in all directions, the area that was blasted away by the 9 rays of light formed by the 9 laws, a crack suddenly appeared in the starry sky. A black gourd flew out from within the crack. The moment the gourd appeared, the mouth of the gourd opened on its own. A huge suction force erupted from within, and an aged voice sounded faintly from within the crack in the starry sky. "Withdraw!" As soon as the words were spoken, the 9 streaks of light formed by the laws were unable to dodge and were immediately absorbed by the gourd. At the same time, the suction force from the gourd spread across the starry sky in all directions in an instant, causing a large amount of ripples to appear in the surrounding starry sky. It was as if it had frozen solid. The mist formed by Wang Baoli's clone seemed to be compressed at that moment, unable to continue spreading. It was then absorbed and swept towards the gourd. Even though Wang Baoli's clone, who had transformed into mist, was struggling, the gourd was clearly extraordinary. Its power erupted once again, causing the mist formed by Wang Baoli to be instantly swept away. It could be seen with the naked eye, it was sucked into the calabash in an instant. At the same time, the moment the mist that Wang Baoli's clone had turned into was sucked into the calabash, Wang Baoli's actual body, who was meditating in seclusion in the Divine Eye Star, which was located far away from the Divine Eye civilization, suddenly opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes, the flames of the Divine Eye Star erupted. Bolts of lightning danced and spread throughout the Divine Eye civilization. Wang Baoli, who had opened his eyes, was filled with a terrifying aura. A cold glint flashed in his eyes, a terrifying ripple erupted from within his body. The Tao stars appeared, and the 9 ancient stars shone faintly. Wang Baoli snorted coldly. A severely injured star. As he spoke, Wang Baoli's true self raised his right hand and formed a seal. The flames of the Divine Eye Star erupted once again, enveloping it with the force of teleportation. In the next instant, as the flames dispersed, Wang Baoli's true body disappeared completely. At the same time, after Wang Baoli's clone was sucked away by the calabash, a youth walked out from the crack beside the calabash. The youth was dressed in a brocade robe. He looked to be 13 or 14 years old, but his hair and eyebrows were white. There was an aura of time around him. As he walked out, he lifted his right hand and held the calabash. His eyes were like stars, and as they shone, he swept his gaze over Yunzi's divine soul and the middle-aged cultivator. The 2 men trembled, and immediately dropped to their knees to kowtow to the youth. "Greetings, master." Shockingly, the youth was their master. He was also the only stellar patriarch in the ancient bronze sword where the vast expanse Tao Palace was located. Back then, Yunzi wasn't the only one who had awoken. His senior brother had awoken, as well as stellar patriarch from the vast expanse Tao Palace. However, his injuries had been too severe back then, and most of his cultivation base had been lost. Over the years, he had only managed to recover a small portion of his cultivation base under the worship of his 2 disciples. However, to be able to escape the annihilation of the vast expanse Tao Palace by the Wei Yang clan and survive, it was clear that the star must have been extremely powerful and unique. This could be seen from the fact that Yunzi and his senior brother had knelt and worshipped him the moment he appeared. After that, the 2 senior brothers had even taken the initiative to admit their mistakes while kneeling. It's just a newly promoted native meat bug causing trouble. Such a small matter has disturbed Master's cultivation base. "Master, please punish him. Master, please punish him." Both Yunzi and his senior brother were extremely nervous. After all, they knew their master very well. He was temperamental and was decisive in killing. Back in the war, his disciples had been at a disadvantage. He had personally killed more than 1,000 of his fellow disciples. As for the 2 of them, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly in front of him. The young man narrowed his eyes as he looked at the gourd in his hand. Deep within them, confusion flickered. He had a feeling that something was off about the person who had just killed him. However, his cultivation base had only recovered less than 10% of its original level. He couldn't use many of his divine abilities, so he couldn't tell exactly what was going on. However, his instincts told him that something was off. As of this moment, he planned to bring the young man back to the vast expanse Tao Palace and use external forces to try to refine him. He wanted to see if he could find the reason for the oddity. That was also why he did not punish his 2 disciples. Instead, he looked them over and said coolly, "This is no ordinary fleshly worm. this fleshly worm. Before the young man could finish speaking, his expression flickered, and he looked up into the starry sky. As he did, he saw a sea of light in the direction of the starry sky, with an indescribable aura. It erupted with a bang and poured down towards him. This sea of light was 9 colors. It contained 9 laws. At this moment, it did not hide anything as it completely erupted, causing the starry sky of the solar system to tremble. What shocked the youth even more was that within the sea of light formed from the fusion of the 9 laws, there was also a seemingly supreme power of laws that suppressed all directions and shook all living things. It was like a mountain toppling over the sea as it madly closed in, directly enveloping the 3 of them. This law. This is Tao Star? The youth's expression changed drastically, disbelief appeared in his eyes. The gourd in his hand began to shake violently. The entire process took only 2 breaths of time. As the sea of light spread and covered everything in all directions, the gourd exploded with a loud bang and collapsed on its own. The mist formed by Wang Baoli's doppelganger instantly fused into the sea of light. At the same time, a cold voice rang in the ears of the 3 of them. "Old fart, who are you calling a flesh worm?" Chapter 989. Chapter 989, Chapter 989, The Attack on the Ancient Sword. The person who had spoken was Wang Baoli himself. His voice was cold and filled with endless killing intent. If it had been his clone who had spoken earlier, it would have caused some ripples, but it wouldn't have caused too much shock. However, things were different now. On one hand, the explosion of the 9-colored sea of light. On the other hand, there was the murderous aura contained in Wang Baoli's words. The murderous aura seemed illusory. However, powerful individuals could sense the terror of their opponents. This was especially so for the young stellar ancestor. Based on his cultivation and his unique techniques, he instantly sensed the death aura of at least 5 planets from the murderous aura contained in his words. This meant that the other party had killed at least 5 planets not too long ago. To be able to kill such a large number of people at the same cultivation realm, no matter what method was used, it could prove one thing. The person who had come was extraordinary. That was indeed the case. Wang Baoli's murderous aura was unleashed without any restraint. This was due to the fact that the number of people who had awoken from the ancient green bronze sword, as well as their cultivation, had exceeded his expectations. It was also due to the anger caused by the suppression of his clone. He knew very well that this time, he had to end things with the vast expanse Tao Palace. If he wanted to end things, he had to put on a strong front. He couldn't let the other party think that he was forcing himself. That was why the moment his clone was sucked into the gourd, Wang Baoli's original body had sensed it. He had used the power of the divine eye-star teleportation and arrived in an instant. The first thing he did was to unleash all of his cultivation and the power of the Tao Star without hesitation. It formed a 9-colored sea of light storm that erupted throughout the entire solar system. It could be said that Wang Baoli, who had fused with the Tao Stars, might only be at the early stage of the planet realm, but his combat prowess was so strong that he could suppress all the perfected planets that had fused with the spirit and immortal planets, only planets that had been upgraded from special planets and whose cultivation was 2 minor realms higher than his could fight against him, who had a Tao Star. In other words, only those with special planets at the late stage of the planet realm could fight against him. Or perhaps, a person who had fused with a Tao Star was on the same level as him in terms of status. However, because of the terrifying power of his Tao Star, even if he met a cultivator with the same Tao Star and the same cultivation base, he would still be no match for him. This was the terrifying aspect of a planet cultivator who had fused with a Tao Star. It was also because of this, that the quality of a planet in the Weiyang Dao domain would cause countless people to go crazy. It was also the reason why the meteorite lands attracted the attention of the large clans and sects. The further one progressed on the path of cultivation, the greater the gap between them. It was the same even when they were at the same level. Sometimes, the gap between them could even be described as the difference between heaven and earth. For example, at that moment, when Wang Baoli's true body arrived and the 9-colored sea of light swept across, Yunzi let out a shrill scream. His soul couldn't take it anymore. It showed signs of dissipating, and there was even pain in his soul. It was as if it wanted to tear everything apart. As Yunzi screamed in pain, he chose to retreat rapidly. He merged back into the beam of light from the ancient bronze sword and fled frantically. The reason why he instinctively chose to flee was partly due to his own fear. Another reason was that he had already realized that the person who had fought with them earlier was just a clone. An avatar required the combined efforts of the three of them to suppress it. Then, if the person's original body had arrived, his master would have been fine if he hadn't been injured. However, it was unknown whether he could resist in his current state. Furthermore, even if he could resist, he didn't think that he could withstand the ripples caused by the battle between the two powerful cultivators in his current state. From what he could see, he was afraid that once the two of them started fighting, he would be affected and killed. Almost at the same moment that Dianzi fled, his senior brother had chosen the same path as him. Although his senior brother wasn't injured, the murderous intent from Wang Baoli's true body and the vast nine-colored sea of light. It caused the middle-aged cultivator to feel a sharp pain between his brows. This pain stemmed from his innate ability. The only use of this ability was to predict life and death. It was reflected in the pain between his brows. The greater the pain, the greater the possibility of death. The pain he felt now, almost the same as when the vast Dao Palace was severely damaged and nearly destroyed. How could this not make him panic with his junior brother, crazy escape? However, under the cover of Wang Baoli's nine-colored sea of light, how could the two of them escape in an instant? Unless their master was willing to do whatever it took to stall Wang Baoli. But for a star power, the long life of its emotions have disappeared too much. If itself is cold thin character, then it will be even more so. Their own safety is the most important. That was especially so. After he had escaped the crisis of the sect's destruction and had sustained serious injuries, he had finally managed to recover some of his cultivation from his deep slumber. He had cherished his life and cherished his injuries even more. Not only was it a last resort, he would never allow himself to be injured again. That was because it would make his injuries, which had not fully recovered, even more serious. There was a high possibility that he would fall into a deep slumber again. To the young man from the star, that was something he did not wish to bear. That was why, the moment Wang Baoli appeared, the moment he cried out in shock, the moment the calabash in his hands exploded, the moment his two disciples escaped, he had already retreated. Returning to the crack that had appeared earlier, he had disappeared in an instant. His disappearance caused his two disciples to react as they retreated. Their faces turned extremely pale. However, they didn't have the time to say anything. They could only run frantically, trying to escape. What awaited them was Wang Baoli's true form, who had merged with his clone and emerged from the nine-colored sea of light with a long rainbow-like aura. His speed was so fast that it seemed to tear through the void in the next instant. He appeared directly within the beam of light that Dianzi was in. The pull of the beam of light boosted Dianzi's speed and allowed him to rapidly pass through the sea of light. However, as Wang Baoli arrived and Dianzi screamed shrilly, the beam of light that he was in was invaded by the nine colors. As the changes occurred, Wang Baoli's right hand had already reached deep into the light beam and grabbed Dianzi's soul. He pulled hard, and as Dianzi screamed, his soul was pulled out. He didn't even give Dianzi the chance to beg for mercy. Killing intent flashed in Wang Baoli's eyes, and he threw Dianzi's soul back. It was instantly devoured by the black eyes that had suddenly appeared behind him. The extent of his misery was indescribable. As he sensed the feedback from the black eye, Wang Baoli's eyes were dark as he swept his gaze towards senior brother Dianzi, who was so shocked that his scalp went numb. Dianzi's senior brother's teeth were chattering, and the fear in his heart was about to swallow him whole. The appearance of Wang Baoli's true body was no different from a star to him, and it was even more terrifying. Therefore, when his eyes met Wang Baoli's, he lost sight of the other party. The piercing pain between his brows seemed to make his head explode, and Dianzi's senior brother let out an intense roar. I woke up 3 years later than Dianzi. Senior, if you don't believe me, you can search my soul. I didn't give any orders against the Federation, and my hands aren't stained with any drops of the blood of the Federation's citizens. His words were hurried. As his voice reverberated, Wang Baoli, who had disappeared from his sight, appeared behind him. He raised his right hand and was about to slap the person's head. It was easy to imagine how powerful Wang Baoli was now. With that slap, the person's head would definitely shatter, and his physical body would be destroyed. His soul wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being devoured. However, it had to be said that the last words of Dianzi's senior brother had played a part. Due to Little Missy's existence, even though Wang Baoli was furious, he couldn't be too ruthless. After all, the vast expanse Dao Palace could, to a certain extent, be an ally. They could also be allies. However, all of this required the opponent to be beaten until they were in pain, and it also required sufficient deterrence. Therefore, in the blink of an eye, Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes. His palm turned from a slap to a cut, and in an instant, it sliced across De Yun's senior brother's neck. It cut across. Immediately, fresh blood spurted out. As De Yun's physical body below the head collapsed, his head remained intact. His soul was also suppressed in his head. Although he had managed to survive, Wang Baoli grabbed his hair. He grabbed his head and headed straight for the ancient bronze sword. The matter was not over yet. Deterrence was not enough. Chapter 990. Chapter 990, Reappearance in the Dao Palace. Not all the citizens of the Federation were able to see the scene in the starry skies through the projection of the solar system array formation. The solar system array formation had lost its effectiveness after the appearance of the stellar youth. Furthermore, the image of Wang Baoli's original body arriving couldn't be seen by anyone. Therefore, everyone, including Li Xingwen, didn't know that in such a short period of time, Wang Baoli's clone had already fused with his original body. It was only after the stellar youth had left, under the suppression of Wang Baoli's Dao Star, that the power of the array formation of the solar system was restored. The projection of the scene in the Federation reappeared. Therefore, what the Federation citizens and cultivators saw was the scene of Wang Baoli devouring De Yunzi, beheading his senior brother De Yunzi's body, and holding his head. Everyone gasped at the sight. Li Xingwen's eyes widened. He had seen how powerful Wang Baoli was previously, but now, he realized that they seemed to be two different people compared to before. Those are two planets, Li Xingwen muttered to himself. His eyes gradually revealed an even stronger sense of excitement. At the same time, he noticed, the governor of the Martian colony, the giant tree, Li Wan-er's father, who was the head of the Senate, and the sect lord of the Galactic Dusk sect. These few people, along with Lin Yu, were the strongest people in the Federation, including Li Xingwen. Their hearts were also in turmoil, especially the giant tree. His eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. He was extremely glad that he and Wang Baoli had resolved their conflict long ago. At the same time, he couldn't help but picture the scene of the other party escaping from his hands all those years ago. The sect lord of the Galactic Dusk sect had a similar level of complexity to that of the giant tree. He was filled with endless emotions. However, the other two on Mars, perhaps due to some other emotions, their thoughts were completely different. The Martian colony governor, for example, had a strange expression on her face. As she looked at Wang Baoli in the picture, she thought of her own daughter. The head counselor also thought of his daughter, Li Wan-er. In the end, as his daughter appeared, more wrinkles appeared on his face, and his eyes dimmed. Other than these people, there were Lin Qianhao, Liu Daobin, Du Minute, and Wang Baoli's companions who had witnessed everything with their own eyes. They watched as Wang Baoli, who had his head in his hands, headed straight for the ancient bronze sword. They sighed in their hearts. Among these people were those who had participated in the Dark Swallow project but had returned after failing due to other reasons. In the past, even though there was a gap between them and Wang Baoli, deep in their hearts, they did not believe that such a gap could not be surpassed. Now, as they watched Wang Baoli rush towards the ancient bronze sword, they no longer saw a person in their eyes. Instead, they saw a god who was walking further and further away. A soft sigh came from Du Min's mouth. The voice was very weak, and only Lin Qianhao, who was beside her, heard it. He turned his head to look at Du Minute, and Lin Qianhao held Du Min's hand. He smiled gently, and on the hand that they were holding, a pair of wedding rings could be seen. At the same time, in Wang Baoli's parents' residence on Mars, a girl was holding Wang Baoli's mother's hand. She was accompanying the two elders as they watched the live broadcast projection from the array formation of the solar system. As she watched Wang Baoli, who was getting further and further away, the girl's eyes dimmed. However, it was quickly replaced by calmness. She was Zhu Xiaoya. In the other regions, Li Wuqian, Jin Duoming, and the others, who had returned from the Dark Swallow project due to various reasons and special methods, were all staring at Wang Baoli. They were familiar figures to Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli knew that he was being stared at by countless people in the Federation. He didn't want to hide his cultivation, nor did he want to hide the image of him attacking. He knew very well that the Federation needed to build up its confidence, What he could do was to use his own figure to give everyone the greatest amount of support. At the same time, he could also provide a buffer for the rapid increase in the level of life brought about by the fusion with the Divine Eye Civilization star. After all these years under the 5-generation Sky Clan's rule, the citizens of the Federation had been enslaved to the point where they had lost their essence, chi, and spirit. At that moment, the fusion with the Divine Eye Civilization was like eating a huge tonic pill. It was a huge tonic in such a weak situation, it wasn't a good thing. Therefore, this buffer, like a seed, became extremely crucial. That was why Wang Baoli didn't stop the spread of the array formation of the solar system. However, he knew very well that as he approached the ancient green-bronze sword, the array formation of the solar system wouldn't be able to affect the vast divine armament. It would also cause everyone who paid attention to it, they wouldn't be able to see everything clearly. However, that was no longer important. The seeds from before were enough. Therefore, Wang Baoli's figure grew faster and faster. Gradually, his entire body turned into a long rainbow that seemed to be able to tear apart the starry sky as he approached the solar system's star. Compared to the Divine Eye Civilization star, the solar system's star was similar in size. At the same time, it was filled with vitality. Although the piercing of the ancient bronze sword had affected it somewhat, however, the effects were acceptable to the sun, which seemed to be growing. Wang Baoli stared at the sun, and a strange feeling rose in his heart. After his cultivation had reached the planet, he knew very well that all cultivators in the Weiyang Dao domain had roots. This root was the star of their homeworld. This was a part of the laws of the universe. The stronger the star of the civilization, the higher the level of life in the civilization. As the star continued to grow, all life born under its light would receive a gift. On the other hand, once the star was enslaved or destroyed, the civilization would lose its vitality. Although it would not cause everyone's cultivation to drop instantly, it would become a wandering civilization without roots. They needed to find a new star and establish a connection with it. Therefore, when some civilizations reached a certain level of development, the strongest among them would choose to merge with the star of the civilization and become a true guardian, passing it down from generation to generation. This was beneficial, but it also had its drawbacks. The choice was a difficult choice for many developing civilizations. Wang Baoli shook his head gently and retracted his gaze from the sun. He suppressed the thoughts that surfaced in his mind and continued walking towards the ancient bronze sword. As he approached, the ancient bronze sword gradually emitted a strong suppressive force. The suppressive force seemed to be controlled by someone. Slowly but heavily, it spread towards Wang Baoli, as if it was going to turn into a hindrance and stop him from coming. However, the person who was controlling the suppressive force of the ancient bronze sword clearly didn't know that it wasn't just him who could affect the ancient bronze sword. Wang Baoli could do the same. As he approached, Wang Baoli raised his right hand and flipped it. Immediately, a jade slip appeared in his hand. This jade slip was the symbol of the vast expanse Dao Palace's Grand Supreme Elder and the recognition of his identity. As the jade slip appeared, the suppressive force emanating from the ancient green bronze sword immediately showed signs of dissipating. This scene clearly shocked the person who was pulling the ancient sword. It was unknown what method he had used. The jade slip in Wang Baoli's hand seemed to have cut off its connection, but it also seemed to have erased his identity. The power of the ancient sword descended once more. Is it interesting? Wang Baoli raised an eyebrow, and a glint flashed in his eyes. The intrinsic scabbard that had been in his body for a long time and had yet to fly out from his true body within the God's Eye civilization. At that moment, a violent tremor shook his body. As it shook, an unseen force connected with the ancient green bronze sword, causing the gigantic ancient green bronze sword to tremble slightly. That single tremor immediately affected all the suppressive force. There was even a faint sense of attraction and joy emanating from the ancient sword, causing the invisible suppressive force in front of Wang Baoli to spread out like a path separating the two sides. In the next instant, his figure stepped onto the ancient sword. He stepped onto the ancient sword. He landed on the hilt of the sword, which was the vast Dao Palace from back then. As he appeared, the Dao Palace cultivators who were sealed and unable to leave the Dao Palace trembled. Feng Juran was the leader. They all knelt down before Wang Baoli. "Greetings, Grand Supreme Elder." Even though they were unable to leave the Dao Palace, they clearly had a way of knowing and seeing what was happening outside. They looked at Wang Baoli nervously. Only Feng Juran looked gloomy and guilty. Wang Baoli stared at the Dao Palace cultivators. He was silent for a moment before speaking calmly. "Elder Ran, please rise. The alliance between the Federation and the Dao Palace will not change." With that, Wang Baoli no longer looked at the vast expanse Dao Palace. Instead, he walked towards the area around the sword. As he moved forward, the pressure on his body grew stronger, the sea of fire beneath his feet rumbled and churned. The sky above him also changed rapidly. Other than the 9 ancient stars and the Dao star in the middle, he was also hidden behind them. A gigantic sword scabbard that seemed to be able to contain the entire ancient bronze sword appeared and replaced the sky. With such an imposing manner, Wang Baoli followed Wang Baoli all the way to the tip of the sword and gradually suppressed it. Chapter 991. Chapter 991, Chapter 991, The Land of Hibernation. It looked like it was walking, but it was so fast that even though the ancient bronze sword covered a vast area, it was no longer the same as before in the eyes of Wang Baoli, who had reached the planet realm. Therefore, in just a few breaths' time, he had already arrived at the boundary between the ancient sword and the sun. As he looked at the place, the image of the huge battleship that the never-ending clan had parked there all those years ago surfaced in his mind. After sweeping his gaze across the empty space, Wang Baoli's expression remained the same. With a single step, he stepped into the ancient sword. The moment he stepped in, he was immediately greeted by the wind of flames. The ground was in ruins. There was also a sense of confusion. There were large numbers of restrictive array formations and rolling lava. All of this could be said to be a crisis for Wang Baoli back then. However, for him now, he could see everything clearly with a single glance. There was also a reason why he didn't choose to step in directly from the other end of the ancient sword. There was a reason for that. If he entered directly from there, it would be considered a forceful attack by an external force. He would have to bear the power of the restrictions from the sword's tip. The gains wouldn't outweigh the losses. Once his opponent was prepared, he could still launch a counterattack there. If he entered directly from the sword's hilt, everything would be fine, as this was a normal path. Therefore, after sweeping his gaze across the area, Wang Baoli didn't pause for even a moment. He grabbed the head in his hand and crossed the various areas, ignoring all the sea of fire restrictions. He didn't even look at the area, occasionally revealing his aura. The fire creatures and some spirit bodies that knelt down in fear and trepidation whizzed past him. In the past, these existences had caused him trouble. However, now, the moment they sensed his aura, they could only tremble. They did not dare resist at all and allowed Wang Baoli to enter the interior of the sword body. Very quickly, he arrived at the blood lake where he had obtained the elder token. He saw the huge corpse and the swaying hairs on its body once again. He scanned the area with his eyes in mid-air, and all the hair on its body trembled and bent down. The sea of blood churned, and the gigantic dragonfly-shaped creature slowly revealed half of its head. Its eyes were filled with shock as it looked at Wang Baoli with an unprecedented level of alertness. From its trembling body, one could tell how terrified it was. It's only somewhere between the spirit immortal realm and the spirit immortal realm. Wang Baoli shook his head and shifted his gaze away from the creature in the blood sea. He didn't stop moving and continued to move forward. As he continued to move forward, he saw many familiar scenes. He flew past many places that he had never been before. He even saw the Eye of 10,000 Arts once again. Memories of the past surfaced in Wang Baoli's mind, causing him to pause in the air above the Eye of 10,000 Arts. He lowered his head to look at the eye-like landscape on the ground, and a strange glow slowly appeared in his eyes. This was the only place he had been unable to see through with his current cultivation. However, he knew that it wasn't the time to investigate further, so he only glanced at it before leaving. After that, he passed through a few areas that he couldn't see through until a long border of ice and snow appeared in front of him. The moment he took a step forward, what appeared in front of him was the familiar land of ice and snow that he had seen before. In the distance in front of him were 3 huge palaces that were thousands of feet tall. Within these 3 palaces, There was a serendipity in a place where some of the older cultivators of the vast expanse Dao Palace were sleeping and recuperating. Back then, Wang Baoli had come to this place the most. However, now, his eyes shone brightly. As the Dao stars in his body circulated, the world before his eyes changed. Behind the three palaces, the empty space was enveloped by a fog. This fog might affect the vision and senses of many people, but it didn't include Wang Baoli, who had fused with the Dao stars. His eyes flashed, he could vaguely see that there were 3 altars within the fog. The 3 altars formed a trapezoid. On the lowest altar, there were 7 figures sitting cross-legged in meditation. These 7 weren't corpses. They were full of life. Even though they weren't full of life, judging from their auras, they were all at the planet grade. Judging from the positions where they were meditating and the shape of their surroundings, it was obvious that there weren't 7 people here before. There were 9 people sitting in a circle. Now, there were 2 fewer people. The ones who were missing were naturally De Yunzi and his senior brother. Wang Baoli was certain of this. He had been to all 3 palaces before the fog. Even the spirit pool in the last palace had cultivators healing their injuries. However, with Wang Baoli's current cultivation, those people might not be planets, or they might have been. However, their cultivation had clearly fallen due to their serious injuries. Other than that, there was also a figure sitting cross-legged on the second altar. There was only one figure. Even though the fog covered it, Wang Baoli could still vaguely see that the person sitting cross-legged was the youth who had attacked his clone earlier. He was the youth who had fled the moment his original body arrived. The youth didn't close his eyes. Instead, he opened his eyes and didn't say a word. He stared intently at Wang Baoli, who was outside the fog. As their gazes met through the fog, the youth suddenly spoke. "You have already killed my disciple who made a mistake, and I have already avoided the battle. Why did you pursue me to this point? Do you really think that the vast expanse Dao Palace is so weak that a planet can wreak havoc here?" The youth's voice was filled with forbearance. There was also a chilling killing intent that seemed to be about to erupt. As it spread out, the fog instantly churned violently. Even the temperature in the outside world had dropped significantly. Wang Baoli's expression remained the same. Although he had heard the youth's words, his gaze swept past him and turned to look behind him, at the third altar. This altar was what made him fearful. That was because there, he saw a figure sitting cross-legged and meditating. The figure's entire body was blurry, and he couldn't see clearly. At the same time, the aura of life and death lingered around him. It was as if his entire body was in the midst of yin and yang. Wang Baoli only took a glance, and his eyes couldn't help but sting. If the Dao stars in his body hadn't been spinning and dissipating rapidly at that moment, he would have been traumatized with just one glance. The galaxy. Wang Baoli muttered to himself. He wasn't surprised that there was a mighty figure from the galaxy in the vast Dao Palace. That was indeed the case. The youth was indeed the only star. That didn't mean that the Dao Palace didn't have an almighty from the star field. Clearly, the reason why the youth had fled back to this place and sat cross-legged in meditation, waiting for Wang Baoli to arrive, and then said those words was because he wanted to rely on the existence of the almighty from the star field to intimidate Wang Baoli. If it had been any other planet, they might have been intimidated. However, even though Wang Baoli averted his gaze with a piercing pain in his eyes, the chill in his heart erupted instantly. He no longer cared about little Missy. He raised his right hand abruptly, and in front of the youth's star, he ignored the screaming head in his hand. He used all his strength to grab it. With a boom, the screaming stopped abruptly. The senior brother of De Yunzi, whose body had been cut off by Wang Baoli, whose head was the only thing left, collapsed instantly. His body and soul were destroyed. "You!" The young star's expression changed when he saw the other party killing his disciple in front of him. However, just as he spoke, Wang Baoli leaped into the air and charged toward the fog. He was so fast that he broke through the fog in an instant. The 9 ancient stars behind him rumbled, and the Dao stars materialized. The devouring seed in his body revolved crazily, and the emperor armor covered his body. The intrinsic scabbard in his body vibrated, and a wisp of sword chi appeared. Wang Baoli guided the sword out of the scabbard and charged towards the index finger on his right hand. His entire body was like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed. It was indestructible. As it tore through the fog, he appeared in front of the stellar youth. "You continue to sleep for 1,000 years." Wang Baoli's voice was cold. As soon as he spoke, his right hand descended. The young man was a star, after all, and he was in his own home ground. His expression was ugly as he roared. He didn't care about his injuries. He raised his hands and waved them. Instantly, the light of the star within his body dispersed. His entire body seemed to have turned into a sun at that moment, pressing down on Wang Baoli. Chapter 993. Chapter 993, Chapter 993 Fighting for the team. Mars trembled and the earth rumbled. Cracks appeared on the surface of Mars and spread rapidly in all directions. At the center of the cracks was the new city of Mars. If one looked from the sky, they could see that the ground with the new city of Mars as its core had formed a ring shape amidst the cracks. It spread rapidly in all directions and covered more than half of Mars in an instant. However, the crack did not cause the ground to collapse. Although the people living on Mars could feel the earth shaking, not a single building was destroyed, and no one was hurt. Instead, wisps of black aura instantly emerged from the crack that had spread across more than half of Mars and shot into the starry sky. If one looked closely, one could even see that there were a large number of tiny particles in the fog. There were also a large number of tiny particles. As the hearts of the people from Mars trembled, they saw with their own eyes that the fog and particles were continuously gathering in the skies. They eventually turned into a storm, emitting a strong aura of death. It shot into the starry skies and turned into a long river. It shot straight for the tip of the ancient bronze sword. It was so fast that it seemed like it could move. In the next instant, it gathered beside the tip of the ancient bronze sword. The moment it arrived, cheers rang out in Wang Baoli's mind. The fog gathered together rapidly. The particles within it seemed to combine together. As they continued to merge, they formed a lone boat. It didn't look big, and it could only fit one person. On the lone boat, as the other particles merged, they formed a black robe that covered the head and an illusory lantern or that emitted a dim light. As it appeared, a divine armament aura that surpassed the Federation's crimson flying dagger exploded on the lone boat's black robe and the lantern ore. It was the Dark Sect's dark artifact. It was inferior to the ancient green bronze sword, and there was a gap between them. The gap was so great that Wang Baoli couldn't bridge it. However, if it had been a higher being from the galaxy that he had approved of using the dark artifact, then under the control of the dark artifact, the ancient bronze sword wouldn't be able to move too much. However, breaking through the array formation and stepping into the sword would pose a direct threat to the galaxy higher being from the vast expanse Dao Palace. He could do it. This was Wang Baoli's deterrent. First, he had revealed the protection the blazing flame ancestor had given him. Then, he had used his intrinsic scabbard to move the ancient sword. He had told the other party that it wasn't impossible for him to control and interfere. At the same time, he had allowed Little Missy to appear. This was to prove that his original relationship with the vast expanse Dao Palace shouldn't have been a clash of arms. After that, he summoned the dark artifact to carry out the final threat. Although he didn't say it explicitly, the meaning behind it was clear. It was that he, Wang Baoli, had the ability to severely injure and even kill the injured Galactic Almighties who had yet to recover. All of this shocked the Galactic Almighties on the third altar. It could be said that waves after waves of attacks continued. His pupils constricted slowly, and he grew more and more silent. No matter how hard he thought about it, he also felt that if they were to become enemies, the consequences would be severe. This forced him to pay more attention to Wang Baoli. On the other hand, the stellar youth's expression had completely changed. His breathing was rapid, and his eyes were filled with panic. He wasn't a fool, he had already sensed that something was amiss. His heart trembled, and he was about to speak. However, before he could finish speaking, the Almighty from the celestial domain on the third altar revealed a look of determination in his eyes. Although he could not afford to offend the blazing flame ancestor, he had the ancient bronze sword to protect him. However, this planet cultivator before him was actually able to shake the ancient sword. This caused everything to change. In addition to the appearance of the strange dark artifact, as well as the saintess whose physical body had been damaged, but whose background could be described as terrifying. All of this was no longer something he needed to weigh. Therefore, in the next instant, the Almighty from the celestial domain let out a sigh. He lifted his right hand and waved it. Instantly, an enormous pressure descended. Amidst the rumbling, it descended directly on the stellar youth. It caused the youth to cough up blood and let out a shrill scream. "Progenitor! Shut up!" The reply he received was the faint words of the Almighty from the celestial domain. The instant he finished speaking, the young star coughed up blood once again. His already injured body was once again injured. All his recovery over the years had gone down the drain. It was even worse than before. His entire body trembled. He didn't even have the time to look at Wang Baoli with hatred. In the midst of his extreme weakness, he fainted. His soul was in the same state. He could recover slowly on the altar, however. To recover to 10% of his cultivation, unless he had some other good fortune, it would take him at least several hundred years. To reach his peak, it would take less than 1,000 years. After that, the Almighty from the star domain, who was sitting cross-legged on the third altar, looked at Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli took a deep breath, and the anger and arrogance on his face disappeared. He cupped his fists and bowed deeply to the Almighty from the star domain. "I, Wang Baoli, pay my respects to Senior. Thank you for upholding justice." The Almighty from the star domain snorted coldly. Deep down, he was displeased with Wang Baoli. He couldn't help but shift his gaze away. He looked at the saintess from his sect, and his gaze softened. He was about to speak, however. Wang Baoli spoke loudly once again. "I respect your personality, Senior. I admire your integrity. At the same time, I have received the favor of the Dao Palace. I am willing to help you and the Dao Palace cultivators heal their injuries and make my own contributions. Therefore, I plan to hold a grand ceremony in a month's time. I will ask my master, the blazing flame ancestor, for a galaxy with stars to come over and integrate into the solar system. With this, we can accelerate the recovery of Senior's cultivation. At the same time, we can also raise the level of civilization in the solar system." As soon as Wang Baoli said that, the eyes of the Almighty from the Dao Palace starfield, who was initially displeased with him, widened. He instantly turned to look at Wang Baoli. "You want to fuse with a civilization with stars?" Wang Baoli's expression remained the same as usual as he nodded. "This is only the first. I still have plans in the future. I will attract more stars and merge them into the solar system, allowing Senior and the others to recover their cultivation faster." A smile appeared on Wang Baoli's face, but his heart was calm. He knew that the vast expanse Dao Palace should not be an enemy. The hatred between the vast expanse Dao Palace and the Wei Yang clan allowed them to become natural allies. However, even if they were allies, they had to respect each other. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allies, but enslaved. That was why he had to put on a show. After all, if he could form an alliance with the vast expanse Dao Palace, it would be beneficial to the Federation. At the same time, he knew how to communicate with others. If he wanted to achieve some of his goals, he had to give them something that would tempt them. There might be many things that could tempt the higher-ups in the galaxy. However, after thinking about it, Wang Baoli realized that the only thing he could give them was the integration of the God's Eye civilization, which would indirectly double the amount of healing. Furthermore, if he had proposed this so-called gift in the beginning, the effect would have been unsatisfactory. This was because their statuses weren't equal. At the same time, if he had used this as a threat to punish the star, it would have had the same negative effect. That was why, as soon as he had appeared, he had killed senior brother De Yunzi in a domineering manner. Then, he had forced the other party to reveal his trump card. That had forced the star domain's mighty figure to punish the star youth. By then, he had, to a certain extent, gained the right to be considered an equal. That was why, when the other party was displeased, he had proposed a gift, and he had done so with such a grand gift. He had done so with such a grand gift, he had done it with ease. Naturally, the Almighty from the galaxy, who was sitting on the altar, instantly understood everything. This made him look at Wang Baoli with a deeper look in his eyes. At the same time, he also understood the main point of the other party's integration with the stars. It was to raise the level of the civilization in this place. However, he had to admit that as the level of the civilization in the solar system increased, he and the others would also benefit greatly from the recovery of their cultivation. At the same time, Wang Baoli's last sentence made him extremely tempted. If Wang Baoli could continuously raise the level of the Federation's civilization and make the stars stronger, then it would be of great benefit to him. After a moment of silence, the Galactic Realm Almighty looked at Wang Baoli with a calm gaze and nodded. "Thank you, my young friend." Qinglingzi didn't know his limits and almost made a huge mistake, destroying the alliance between the Tao Palace and the Federation. He is indeed guilty of this. The Tao Palace and the Federation shouldn't be enemies. We have a common enemy. The Almighty from the celestial domain swept his gaze over the dark artifact outside. He suddenly realized that the planet in front of him had taken out a divine weapon that clearly carried the aura of the Dark Sect. Its purpose was to remind him that it was related to the Dark Sect. Everyone's enemy was the same. What a meticulous, courageous, and resourceful cultivator! The Almighty from the celestial domain sighed softly as he thought back to his own Tao Palace's junior. From now on, the Tao Palace will not participate in any internal affairs of the Federation. They will only share in cultivation. Furthermore, when foreign enemies invade, they will fight against them as one, advancing and retreating together. Thank you, Senior. Wang Baoli took a deep breath, cupped his fists again, and bowed deeply. Chapter 994. Chapter 994, Chapter 994, Federation Reorganization. As Wang Baoli cupped his fists, the little Missy beside him heaved a sigh of relief. She was actually in a difficult position, but she believed that with Wang Baoli's methods, he should be able to handle such matters well. After all, from what she knew, Wang Baoli was very good at dealing with people. At the same time, she didn't believe that Wang Baoli didn't understand that both parties were natural allies. This was because they shared a common enemy, and her existence was also one of the reasons. Therefore, ever since she had appeared, she had been observing without interfering. Now that everyone was happy, a smile appeared on little Missy's face. Seeing little Missy's smile, Wang Baoli smiled as well. He didn't immediately invite her back to the mask. Instead, after communicating with her, he temporarily left her here to reminisce about old times. He took his leave and left the ancient green bronze sword. In the starry skies, he raised his right hand and waved. Immediately, the dark artifact at the tip of the sword whizzed over. Although the three dark artifacts were still incomplete, their bodies had already recovered to a critical point. There was no point in remaining on Mars. Wang Baoli grabbed with his large hand, and the dark artifact immediately fused into his body. It turned into 3 black dots between his brows and then disappeared without a trace. However, with just a thought, they would instantly appear on his body, turning into a dark child that could graze the starry skies. After doing all this, Wang Baoli looked at the solar system from afar. He knew that he wouldn't be able to stay here for long. Cultivation was like sailing against the current. If he didn't advance, he would retreat. Once he set foot on this path, he would have to keep moving forward. Only by doing so could he protect the people and things he wanted to protect and realize his dream. The Federation President is my lifelong dream. It may be within my grasp now, but the Federation is too small. I want to make the Federation bigger and bring the level of civilization to the maximum. When that happens, I will be able to live up to my name as the President. At the same time, there was a reluctance to part before his departure. For the sake of his dream and cultivation, after completing the fusion of the Divine Eye civilization, he had to go out. Therefore, his clone walked out of his original body once again and headed straight for Mars. He planned to spend more time with his family in the coming days. As for his original body, he left the solar system and relied on his connection with the Divine Eye civilization star. He was teleported away and returned to continue setting up the array formation and making preparations. Time passed slowly after Wang Baoli returned to Mars. A week passed quickly. During that week, the news of Wang Baoli killing the 5-generation Sky Clan and destroying the planet in the Tao Palace had spread throughout the entire Federation. On one hand, too many people had witnessed it with their own eyes. On the other hand, Li Xingwen's return to Earth, and the publicity he had received after taking over the government affairs of the Federation had caused Wang Baoli's reputation to rise like a huge wave in the entire Federation. It had reached its peak. Everyone was excited. After Li Xingwen's return, the Federation began to reorganize itself. As the news of his appointment spread and the large number of cultivators on Mars returned, the Federation was like a half-withered flower. After being doused with the water of life, it slowly began to bloom again. First, there was the presidential candidate. After seeking Wang Baoli's opinion, they re-elected the members of the parliament. Finally, Zhao Yameng's mother, the governor of the Martian colony, Wu Mengling, was elected as the new president. Zhao Yameng's father was still in charge of the Spirit Sciences Academy and had entered the parliament. Li Xingwen, like his previous status, was helping the Martian colony governor with matters regarding the Federation. The entire Federation was shaken by the news, but no one raised any objections. Zhao Yameng's mother had been able to take up the position of president, regardless of whether it was due to her hard work or her own experience. Wang Baoli personally attended to her promotion. He removed the divine armament Crimson Star from her hair and gave it to her, allowing the Federation's tradition to continue. He also informed Zhao Yameng of the recent developments. The vacant position of Martian colony governor, the successor was, the current vice president of the Senate, Lin Yu. Not only was he the vice president of the Senate, he was also appointed as the vice president. Lin Yu, who held 3 positions, was undoubtedly being groomed as a future star in the Federation. Lin Yu didn't fail to live up to his expectations. Not only was he resourceful and experienced, he had also made a breakthrough in his cultivation over the years. He had stepped into the spirit realm, and his improvement was extremely fast. He wasn't far from breaking through to the late-stage spirit realm. At the same time, the Venus project had been reactivated after the 5-generation Sky Clan's chaotic governance had been suspended. With Wang Baoli's help, they had retrieved the stellar source from the vast expanse Dao Palace, allowing Venus to be built. This was going to be a major event for the Federation. It would be built into the second Mars, and it would become the core of the array formation of the solar system. The person who would take over the position of the Venus governor would be the former deputy governor of Mars, the giant tree on the moon. During the 5-generation Sky Clan's chaotic period, the giant tree had obtained the true trust and recognition of Li Xingwen and the others through its own choice. That was why it had been given such an important position. At the same time, there were also Jupiter and the other planets. After Zhao Yameng's mother, Wu Mengling, became the president, they were all appointed one after another. This made the solar system's array formation even more majestic and left many openings. Once a large amount of spiritual energy was released, it could expand the array formation's scope. All of this was in preparation for something that could be said to be an extremely important event for the Federation. That was, the fusion of the Divine Eye civilization. Wang Baoli had already informed Li Xingwen and the others about this. Although it was still a secret, it had already spread among the higher-ups. Everyone who knew about this was extremely excited, because they already knew, once the sun fused with the Divine Eye star, the level of civilization in the Federation would increase. At the same time, all life born in the solar system would receive a feedback from the sun's will the moment it fused with the star. This feedback was a rare supplement in the world. It could increase the aptitude of ordinary people and the cultivation of cultivators. Some people who were stuck at a cultivation realm could even use this opportunity to attempt a breakthrough. How could such a thing not be exciting? Besides the appointments of the various planets, there were also a series of internal adjustments within the Federation. For example, Jin Duoming had officially taken over the position of the family head of the Jin family, becoming the supreme leader of the Trilunarist Corporation. After he took over, he immediately issued a plan to cooperate fully with the Spirit Sciences Academy, and create more powerful Spirit Sciences Dharmic artifacts together. Liu Daobin also rose in status. With his relationship with Wang Baoli, his own hard work, and the contributions he had made to the Federation over the years, he was promoted to the Deputy Governor of Mars and was fully in charge of the work of the Martian Special Administrative Region. The other 4 Dao colleges began rebuilding after the Federation had straightened things out. The person in charge of the reconstruction of the Ethereal Dao College was Zhu Xiaoya. She had been appointed as the sect lord of the Ethereal Dao College. While all of this was going on, Wang Baoli had a lot of free time on his hands. He spent every day with his parents, and his life had returned to the calmness and gentleness that he hadn't experienced in a long time. While enjoying the warmth of his family, Wang Baoli continued to nurse his parents' bodies. He slowly healed his mother's injuries, and at the same time, kept the fire of life in his parents' bodies in a healthy state. They even looked much younger. Based on the spirit chi that Wang Baoli left on their bodies, their lifespan could basically reach the limits of their souls. In order to prevent what had happened in the past from happening again, Wang Baoli had spent the past few days, he had made some accessories with his planet cultivation. With these accessories, even if a planet cultivator made a move, it would be very difficult to endanger his parents' lives in a short period of time. He would also be the first to notice. Time passed once again, and half a month before the day of the integration of the God-Eye civilization, Wang Baoli received an invitation to a wedding. Lin Qianhao and Du Min's wedding. When he saw the invitation, Wang Baoli had a strange expression on his face as he prayed for Lin Qianhao. Although he and Du Min were old classmates, they had never gotten along. From Wang Baoli's point of view, with Du Min's hot-tempered personality and her flat figure, it would be extremely difficult for her to get married in this lifetime. Qianhao, oh Qianhao, you have to pray for yourself, Wang Baoli coughed. Even though he said that, he was still very happy deep down. After all, Lin Qianhao was a good friend that he wouldn't get to know unless he fought with him, and Du Min was a classmate of the old class elder, therefore, he was very happy that the two of them could have a result. Of course, this was also the reason why he didn't have any romantic feelings for Du Min. If not, he would have been furious by now. Therefore, after receiving the invitation, Wang Baoli sent a voice transmission to Lin Qianhao, sending him a message to attend. Ever since he had returned, other than going to Zhao Yameng's mother's promotion ceremony, he had been at home all the time, refusing visitors. Therefore, after learning that Wang Baoli would be coming, Lin Qianhao was very happy. At the same time, the news spread, causing everyone who wanted to visit Wang Baoli to pay attention to this matter. Just like that, a few days later, Lin Qianhao and Du Min's wedding on Mars was packed with friends and elites. It was so lively that it could be said to be the wedding of the century. Sigh. Happy holidays, everyone. I plan to take a break during this holiday to spend time with my family and keep up with everyone's holidays. Chapter 995. Chapter 995 came to pay their respects one after another. Lin Yu's status, Lin Qianhao's status as the city lord of Ethereal City, his relationship with Wang Baoli, and his arrival made the wedding on Mars very grand. Wang Baoli had prepared a gift meticulously. The wedding reached its peak, and the banquet began. Wang Baoli held a wine glass in the wedding hall and looked at the new couple in front of him. His heart was filled with emotion. Daobin, why do you think Qianhao is so stubborn? Why did he get married so early? Wang Baoli drank his wine and looked at Liu Daobin, who had followed him as soon as he arrived. He said jokingly, and the smile on his lips was tinged with sympathy. Boss is right. When we go out to play in the future, we'll lose another good brother. Liu Daobin laughed when he heard that. He coughed and said softly. Boss, when you weren't around all these years, the Martian Special Administrative Region received wave after wave of immigrants. They've put in a lot of effort for the construction of the new Martian zone. I plan to select a few people who are both good-looking and good-natured. I plan to form a female celebrity group, and perform in the entire Federation to promote the beauty of the Martian Special Administrative Region. This matter is very important to the Martian Special Administrative Region. Boss, you're my old leader. I sincerely hope that you can give me some guidance. Liu Daobin's expression was solemn and filled with sincerity. He only said those words, no matter how Wang Baoli listened to him, he felt that something was amiss. That was especially so when Liu Daobin took out a jade slip and told him the information of the candidates. He asked Wang Baoli to give him some guidance. Wang Baoli's expression turned odd. Daobin, Daobin, you. Wang Baoli didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just as he was about to knock on the door, a gentle voice came from behind them. What female team? Liu Daobin, let me take a look. Wang Baoli turned his head and looked at the familiar figure walking over. His eyes were filled with reminiscence as he spoke softly. Xiaoya. The person who had come was Zhu Xiaoya. She had changed a little from how she looked back then. She no longer looked like a timid person. Instead, she was gentle and gentle. At the same time, she also carried a hint of firmness. It was obvious that she was gentle on the outside but firm on the inside. Her appearance made Liu Daobin blink. He kept the jade slip in his hand without batting an eyelid and cupped his fists at Zhu Xiaoya with a smile. Greetings, Sect Lord Ju. With that, he bowed to Wang Baoli. Old leader, I shall not disturb you and Sect Lord Ju from catching up on old times. I will report to you later. As he spoke, Liu Daobin bowed to the two of them again before retreating. Zhu Xiaoya glanced at Liu Daobin, who had left. Her beautiful eyes eventually landed on Wang Baoli's face. She retracted her gaze and stood beside him without saying a word. Instead, she looked at Lin Qianhao and Du Minute, who were in the middle of their wedding ceremony. Her eyes were filled with blessings and a hint of envy. This Liu Daobin is too much of a troublemaker. I will teach him a lesson later. Seeing that Zhu Xiaoya had arrived without saying a word, Wang Baoli coughed and tried to find something to say. In truth, he felt guilty and grateful towards Zhu Xiaoya. His parents had often mentioned Zhu Xiaoya during this period of time, which made Wang Baoli realize that Zhu Xiaoya's company during his absence, it was very heartwarming for his parents. However, he was no longer the same person he was back then. He knew very well that he couldn't stay in the Federation for too long. Therefore, any emotional ties between him and his old friends would eventually make him wait alone. Wang Baoli didn't want to and couldn't do such a thing. That was why when he returned, he didn't look for Zhu Xiaoya. She knew that he had returned, but she didn't go to see him either. There seemed to be some distance between the two of them that they both knew about. That was why they had met for the first time since their return. I need to teach her a lesson, Zhu Xiaoya said calmly, not looking at Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli blinked and coughed. He then secretly glanced at Zhu Xiaoya. After a moment of silence, he sighed softly in his heart. He knew what she was thinking, but he couldn't say the words to make her wait any longer. After a moment of silence, it turned into 2 words. Thank you. Upon hearing those 2 words, Zhu Xiaoya turned her head slightly and stared at Wang Baoli with her beautiful eyes. After a long while, she smiled slightly. Her eyes curved into a crescent moon due to the appearance of the smile. She was very beautiful, but it also made her appear gentle, and gentle, it became more and more obvious. She raised her hand and helped Wang Baoli tidy up his clothes. Then, she breathed softly into his ear like an orchid. Did you owe you in your past life? Is that why you wanted to seduce my heart when I first entered the Dao college in this life? You were able to hear about you from the mouths of the people around you time and time again. You made me unable to forget you and make my heart unable to contain anyone else. Since that's the case, your little white rabbit will wait for you. Zhu Xiaoya blew into Wang Baoli's ear. She didn't turn her head and walked away from him. She walked further and further away. Only the fragrance of the orchid still lingered in Wang Baoli's nose. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at Zhu Xiaoya's back as she disappeared into the crowd. As he watched, the wedding had unknowingly come to an end. Lin Qianhao finally pulled his body out and found Wang Baoli together with Du Minute. As he looked at the couple before him, Wang Baoli suppressed the image of Zhu Xiaoya that filled his mind. Lin Qianhao smiled and gave his blessings. He also told Wang Baoli that the only person who had not returned from the Dark Swallow plan and had not received any news was Kong Dao. Kong Dao's remaining lamp of life has not been extinguished, but its color has changed. Lin Qianhao had wanted to say a few more words, but he was the main character today, so he was quickly dragged away, leaving Wang Baoli in deep thought. His thoughts didn't last long. After the wedding ceremony ended, groups of people started chatting and laughing at each other at the banquet. There was an endless stream of people who came to visit Wang Baoli amidst the bustle. It was a good thing that he had a high status now, and his status was extremely high. Therefore, those who came to visit him didn't dare disturb him too much. They would leave after they paid their respects. That was until an old friend of his appeared before Wang Baoli. He bowed deeply to Wang Baoli, his eyes filled with emotion and regret. Greetings, my lord. The visitor was the current governor of the Golden Star City. He was a cultivator that had been formed by the moon hanging tree, who had been involved with Wang Baoli in the past. The giant tree didn't know how to address Wang Baoli respectfully. It hesitated for a moment before saying, "My lord. My lord." His cultivation had improved over the years. He had advanced from the perfected nascent soul realm to the spirit realm. However, whether it was in the vast expanse Dao Palace or here now, the emotion and regret in his heart were extremely strong. At the same time, he didn't dare slight Wang Baoli. He was extremely respectful and respectful. "There's no need for that, fellow Daoist Gui," Wang Baoli said with a smile. He helped the giant tree, which had bowed down to greet him, up. He looked at the fluctuations in the other party's cultivation, and the smile on Wang Baoli's face was sincere. "Over the years, fellow Daoist Gui has done the Federation a favor." To the giant tree, this sentence was much heavier than what others had said 10,000 times. It made him shudder. It was true that he had never thought of betraying the Federation, even when Li Xingwen's faction was in danger. Now that the situation had turned for the better and Wang Baoli had agreed with him, it was enough for him. The giant tree took a deep breath and bowed again. After a moment of hesitation, he said softly, "Sir, you are too kind. This is also my home. With your cultivation, if you have the time, you can explore the ruins on Earth. Perhaps you will be able to see some secrets about the solar system." Wang Baoli's eyes flashed as he looked at the giant tree. "Sir, my true form is the laurel tree on the moon. It has existed for a very long time. In my blurry thoughts, there is a memory. I don't know if this memory is real. It seems like a very, very long time ago, there was a powerful cultivation force in the solar system. I was one of the cultivators in that force who planted it on the moon. Although this cultivation force has long left, I have a feeling that they still exist in this starry sky. Furthermore, the disappearances that have occurred since the Spirit Inception era in the Federation should be extremely related to this cultivation force. They seem to be using such a method to select disciples from the current solar system. For example, Lin Yu." The tree spoke in a deep and soft voice. Chapter 996. Chapter 996, Chapter 996, Li Wan Oh. Wang Baoli's expression was the same as ever. He listened to the words of the giant tree beside him, the smile still on his face. He swept his gaze across the crowd and nodded politely at the few cultivators who were bowing to him. He also saw the scene of the wedding. Lin Yu, who was surrounded by a crowd in the distance, was looking at him. Wang Baoli smiled slightly and nodded at Lin Yu. Lin Yu's appearance didn't seem to have changed much compared to before. After all, after reaching a certain level of cultivation, the traces of time on his body would become lighter. Other than his aura, it wasn't easy to judge his appearance. He had been paying attention to Wang Baoli the entire time. When he noticed Wang Baoli's gaze, Lin Yu's expression was solemn. He bowed deeply at Wang Baoli across the crowd. As he stood up, a hint of hesitation flashed across his eyes. However, that hesitation quickly turned into decisiveness. He walked towards Wang Baoli. Seeing that Lin Yu, whom he had just mentioned, was walking towards him, the giant tree didn't seem to have any abnormalities on his face. His expression remained respectful. However, his words had changed to reporting on his work on Mars over the years. His voice wasn't loud. Lin Yu, who was walking towards them, could hear a little of it. As Lin Yu approached and laughed, the giant tree turned around and cupped his fists at Lin Yu with a smile. "Fellow Daoist Gui, I'm not disturbing you, am I? Can you give me a moment of Baoli's time?" Lin Yu joked, his eyes filled with kindness. "President Lin, you must be joking. I've already finished my report. I wouldn't dare disturb you any further." The giant tree's expression remained the same. He smiled and cupped his fists again before taking his leave respectfully. As he watched the giant tree leave, Lin Yu swept his gaze across the area casually. When he turned his head to look at Wang Baoli, his expression was filled with emotion and regret. Even though he didn't speak to Wang Baoli immediately, his expression, the words he was about to say were very clear. He didn't need to speak, but his expression was enough to let others understand. Wang Baoli had only seen Du and Muk and Li Xingwen among the higher-ups of the Federation regarding his past abilities. Many years have passed in a flash. Lin Yu sighed softly. His expression turned solemn once again. He took a step back and bowed deeply to Wang Baoli. "Moon Star Sect's in-name disciple, Lin Yu, greet Senior." Wang Baoli raised his eyebrows slightly. He looked at Lin Yu, who was in front of him, and asked, "Senior, what do you mean? Moonstar Sect? When did such a sect appear in our Federation?" "Fellow Daoist Lin, what do you mean by that?" "Baoli, stop teasing me." Lin Yu smiled bitterly and cupped his fists once again. Baoli, I don't know if fellow Daoist Gui said anything to you, but in order to avoid causing unnecessary misunderstandings, I still have to explain myself. Back then, I went missing in a ruin on Earth. I returned many years later. As for what happened during my disappearance, although most of it was reported to the Federation for the record, there are still some secrets that I haven't revealed. Lin Yu was silent for a moment, he spoke softly. The place where I went missing was called the Moonstar Sect. This sect should be related to the ancient Earth. Therefore, I wasn't the first, nor was I the last person to be sent there. After a series of inspections, I became an in-name disciple and was taught cultivation techniques. Finally, I was sent back with a mission. What mission? Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes and asked slowly. To record the evolution of Earth since the Spirit Inception era, and to participate in it. In the midst of the danger that would affect the life and death of the entire Federation, to send someone whom I believe to be a seed into the ruins. Lin Yu's eyes were full of honesty, he didn't hide anything. I don't know what the Moonstar Sect is up to, but I do know one thing. The Federation is my hometown. That's why I didn't send anyone there after I returned. Instead, I took the initiative to report it. As a result, the number of missing people in the ruins has decreased over the years. However, Baoli, if there really is an irreversible life and death crisis in the Federation, I might still carry out that mission in the end and try my best to leave a spark for the Federation. The reason why I'm telling you now is because I, Lin Yu, have no regrets. With that, Lin Yu bowed deeply towards Wang Baoli once again. He raised his head and didn't avoid Wang Baoli's gaze, allowing him to see his honesty. He stared at Lin Yu for a long time before Wang Baoli nodded slowly. There was a thoughtful look in his eyes, and he suddenly asked, "Tell me about the Moonstar Sect." Tell me about the Moonstar Sect. I don't know where the Moonstar Sect is, nor do I know how powerful it is. However, I do know that there should be at least hundreds of cultivators like you, Baoli. As for the stars, just by looking up from the Moonstar Sect, I can see that there are dozens of stars in the sky. At the same time, the Moonstar Sect must have a deep connection to the ancient Earth. In fact, it's possible that they were created by the ancients who migrated from Earth. In addition, I've seen quite a few laurel trees in the Moonstar Sect, just like fellow Daoist Gui. Lin Yu's heart palpitated as he spoke, as if he had just recalled something. Oh, right. In the Moonstar Sect, everyone who has reached a certain level of status wears a mask. Masks come in all shapes and sizes, and most of them are different. A mask? Wang Baoli was taken aback and fell into deep thought. Lin Yu heaved a sigh of relief after he had finished speaking. He hadn't lied. He didn't want to cause any misunderstandings between Wang Baoli and himself, and he didn't want them to become enemies. After all, this was his hometown, and everything about him was in the Federation. Now that his son was getting married, his feelings for this place were even deeper. That was why when he had seen the giant tree talking to Wang Baoli earlier, even though he didn't know the details, he had a feeling that something was amiss. That was why he had made up his mind after some hesitation. He revealed all the secrets that had been hidden deep in his heart. He believed that with Wang Baoli's intelligence and experience, he would be able to tell if what he had said was true or false. After he finished speaking, Lin Yu felt much more relaxed. He saw that Wang Baoli was deep in thought, so he didn't continue disturbing him. Instead, he cupped his fists and left. There were many people who could sense that Wang Baoli was deep in thought. After all, those who could attend the wedding were mostly the upper echelons of the Federation. They could tell when to stop. Therefore, no one came to disturb Wang Baoli's thoughts for the rest of the time. Just like that, after the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, Wang Baoli muttered to himself. I seem to have overlooked something. Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes. When he heard the word mask and thought about it, the image of the masked woman in the fallen star lands appeared in his mind. The image of the woman could not be erased. As his mind became more and more focused, he finally fixed his eyes on the beautiful woman's mask. As he recalled, the gaze of the woman in the mask became clearer in his mind. Finally, Wang Baoli raised his right hand and took out the jade slip that could contact the blazing flame ancestor. After a moment of silence, he sent a voice transmission respectfully. Is Master around? Do you have the complete list of people who have been promoted to planet level from the Fallen Star lands to the Weiyang domain? Wang Baoli knew that not everyone could see the list. Only those who were qualified enough to receive it in the Weiyang domain would receive it. In the Fallen Star lands, he could only see himself. He couldn't see everything. He hadn't paid much attention to the matter at first, but now, with the masked woman's figure and suspicions in his mind, Wang Baoli decided to look through the entire list. Soon, the Blazing Flame Patriarch, who had received Wang Baoli's voice transmission, sent the list over. He also replied to Wang Baoli. My good disciple, I've already arranged for someone to pick you up. When you're done with your matters, I'll wait for you in the Raging Flame Galaxy. As per Master's orders. Wang Baoli replied respectfully. He immediately opened the complete list that the Raging Flame Ancestor had sent him. After scanning it, his breathing quickened, and his pupils constricted. He stared at the name on the list. Li Wan Moon Star Sect. Li Wan is this a coincidence? Wang Baoli's mind was filled with disbelief as Li Wan's figure and the masked woman overlapped. He sent a voice transmission to Lin Qianhao, who was toasting with Du Minute. Then, he left the wedding venue in a hurry. He stepped out of the hall and disappeared instantly. When he appeared, he was no longer on Mars. Instead, he was speeding through the starry skies. He landed on Earth in an instant and appeared outside the chairman's residence. Outside the residence, Wang Baoli took a deep breath and stood there, cupping his fists and bowing. This junior, Wang Baoli, seeks an audience with Uncle Li. Although the senator's cultivation had fallen to that of a mortal, his contributions to the Federation, especially his status as Li Wan's father, made it necessary for Wang Baoli to treat him as a junior. Chapter 997. Chapter 997 Sealed Remains. The visit didn't last long. In the end, Wang Baoli left the senator's residence under the senator's personal escort. It was late at night outside. He looked at the bright moon in the sky and felt the gentle breeze blowing in his face. Wang Baoli walked on the streets with a complicated expression on his face. He wasn't the only person on the streets. He could occasionally see a few passers-by walking past him. However, none of the passers-by seemed to be able to see Wang Baoli in their eyes. This made his presence very abrupt, and at the same time, it was similar to how he felt, and there was a hint of sadness in his heart. He thought of Zhao Yaming and Zhu Xiaoya. He had learned from the head senator that Li Wan had gone missing. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, she had not participated in the Dark Swallow project. This incident made Li Wan feel guilty and unwilling. Therefore, she, who had access to some of the Federation's secrets, went to some of the ruins on Earth. In the end, she disappeared without a trace. After knowing all this, Wang Baoli recalled everything that had happened at the Fallen Star. His guess had been confirmed. The image of the masked woman in his mind had completely overlapped with the familiar body of Li Wan. Why didn't she tell me? Was there something she was hiding, or was she unwilling to tell me? Wang Baoli shook his head. He suppressed the thoughts in his heart. He felt that no matter what, they would meet again in the starry skies in the future. In order to reassure the council member, Wang Baoli had thought about it and told him about Li Wan. At the same time, from the council member, Wang Baoli learned that Kong Dao wasn't the only one who hadn't returned to the Dark Swallow plan. Li Wuchen hadn't returned either. However, just like Kong Dao, the flame of life hadn't been extinguished. Based on a simple estimation, there shouldn't have been too many life-and-death accidents. Wang Baoli was a little emotional, but he understood that ever since he had embarked on this path of cultivation, he could only wish each of them well. As for the ruins, Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes. This was a hidden danger after all. The relationship between the Moonstar sect and Earth was uncertain. However, regardless, the other party had immense power. Compared to the current Federation, they were extremely weak. As a result, there was a strong imbalance between the two parties. This imbalance meant that the Federation had no right to take the initiative. If that's the case, it's better to seal those ruins. Wang Baoli's eyes shone brightly. He slowly closed his eyes and spread out his divine sense, covering the entire Earth and searching for all the ruins. As his divine sense spread out, everything on earth instantly became clear in his mind. He saw the lights of tens of thousands of homes. They were the joys and sorrows of countless living beings in the cities. The appearance of all living beings in an instant represented a different life. Wang Baoli was deeply affected by it, causing ripples to form in his heart. Then, he saw the endless wilderness. It had once been the gathering place of ferocious beasts, now, he couldn't see many ferocious beasts anymore. Even some of them had slowly changed their habits and become harmless after being suppressed for so many years. That was the only way they could survive. Other than that, Wang Baoli also saw the vast ocean and the mysterious bottom of the ocean. As the ocean stretched as far as the eye could see, the gigantic sea beasts at the bottom of the ocean trembled as Wang Baoli scanned them with his divine sense. "There are no more secrets," Wang Baoli muttered. He saw the spirit chi that was slowly growing throughout the entire earth. The spirit chi was weak, but it continued to spread. Since the spirit inception era, the spirit chi on earth no longer came from the fragments of the ancient green bronze sword. Instead, it was slowly condensing itself under the constant changes in the environment. It could be imagined that even without external help, the environment on Earth would become richer in spirit chi after tens of thousands of years. Looking at all this, 9 regions finally appeared in Wang Baoli's mind. They were 9 ruins. The 9 ruins were scattered across the Earth. The distance between them seemed to be irregular, but Wang Baoli could vaguely sense the traces of the array formation restriction. There were 3 locations in particular. Wang Baoli didn't see any records in the Federation's secret manual. This meant that the Federation hadn't noticed the 3 ruins before. They were located deep beneath the sea. At the same time, with Wang Baoli's current cultivation, he couldn't see any special fluctuations in the 9 ruins. Everything seemed to be no different from the ruins. However, there had been too many cases of intruders going missing since the Spirit Inception era, despite the fact that there was nothing unusual about the ruins. Is the Moonstar sect an enemy or a friend? Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes and took a step forward, disappearing from the streets. When he reappeared, he was already outside the first ruins. The ruins were buried deep underground. There was a mountain range on top of it, where ferocious beasts used to gather. When Wang Baoli appeared, all he could see was desolation. The mountain peaks were green in color, however, it was difficult to hide the thick aura of death that permeated the area. It was clear that a long time ago, there had been a battle between ferocious beasts and cultivators. The entrance to the ruins was a mountain stream. Even though more than half of it had collapsed, one could still pass through it. Furthermore, it was located around the entrance, there was also the power of the array formation. With just a glance, Wang Baoli could immediately tell that the array formation came from Ethereal Tao College. There was a unique, faintly discernible fog that was unique to Ethereal Tao College. Was it sealed by the Grand Supreme Elder back then? Wang Baoli's body swayed. He ignored the array formation and stepped into the mountain stream. He sped all the way until he reached the interior of the ruins. The place was already empty. There was only the ground at the end. There were obvious traces of the ancient array formation that had been destroyed. The array formation seemed to have existed for a long time. There were even signs of weathering on the ground. With Wang Baoli's cultivation, he could tell at a glance that the array formation was used for teleportation. The area affected was large enough to cover the entire ruins. It looked like it had been destroyed, but it was still powerful. The only difference was that the area affected had been reduced. Wang Baoli stared at the array formation and memorized its structure. A glint flashed in his eyes. The 9 ancient stars behind him materialized into Tao stars. At the same time, he raised his right hand and pressed down lightly on the array formation. With that, the ground began to tremble. The array formation trembled as well, and cracks appeared on its surface. The number of cracks increased. Finally, with a loud boom, the entire array formation seemed to have been torn apart by an invisible hand. It split into 4 parts. Large amounts of spirit chi, visible to the naked eye, rose from the cracks and spread in all directions with a loud boom. Eventually, they covered the entire area and merged with the heavens and earth. Only then did the power of the array formation be completely dispelled. After checking the area again and making sure that he hadn't missed anything, Wang Baoli turned around and left. he went to the second, third, and sixth ruins. The 5 ruins behind him were distributed in different regions of the earth. Some were in rivers, some were deep underground, and some were in a primitive rainforest. They all looked different, and they all existed in rivers. It was a stone ball that didn't look big, but it actually contained supernatural powers and spells. It was as majestic as a small world. Deep underground, there was an underground city. In the primitive rainforest, there was an altar that worshipped unknown gods. These ruins were all recorded in the Federation's records without exception, so there were signs of being sealed. However, to Wang Baoli, these seals were not perfect. As he walked past, he tore apart the array formations in the 5 ruins, all of them. However, what made him feel regretful was that although the 5 ruins looked mysterious, he did not see any clues inside. It was as if everything had collapsed the moment the ruins were opened. Finally, Wang Baoli turned his gaze to the depths of the sea. The 3 ruins that had not been recorded by the Federation, or even detected by humans, were located. They were, a humongous rotting whale that was tens of thousands of feet tall. Half of its body was buried in the mud at the bottom of the sea. The exposed parts of its body were filled with an aura of death that affected the surrounding sea, turning the place pitch black. The other was a temple that was covered in seaweed. It seemed to have been damaged by the mighty force of the changes in the world. In front of the temple, there was a statue of a cultivator. Its face was blurry, but the stone sword on its back still exuded a sharp aura. It caused all the sea creatures that had approached it over the years to pile up into rings of rotting bones. Finally, there was a mountain. There was a stone door at the bottom of the mountain. There were runes engraved on the door. These runes contained a strange power that could make all cultivators who saw it instantly think of the meaning of the runes. The meaning of the runes was sea suppression. Chapter 998. Chapter 998, Chapter 998, Good and evil are hard to determine. The rotting whale, the divine temple, and the sea suppression? Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes as he recalled the various legends he had heard of on Earth. Although there were similar legends, he was still certain that there were no records in any of the legends. There were no records of such legends. Not only were there no records in the Federation, but there were also no records of legends that had existed for a long time. Interesting, Wang Baoli muttered as his body swayed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was at the bottom of the sea where the rotting whale was. As soon as he reappeared, all he could see was darkness. The thick death chi made the seawater in the area seem to be filled with a strange corrosive power. Read on listnovel.c0m for faster updates. Not only were all sea creatures unable to get close, even Wang Baoli felt a little uncomfortable. Even though he was a clone, he was still at the planet level. Furthermore, due to the existence of his Tao planet. This made his origin dharmic body weaker than his actual body in terms of combat power, but the difference wasn't too great. He could still fight even against a planet below the late stage of the immortal planet. However, here, he could clearly sense that if he didn't do something, his origin would be damaged if he stayed here for too long. From this, it could be seen that while this place was strange, it also contained a shocking amount of power. If it was anyone else, even if it was a planet, the slightest hesitation would cause them to die here. The rotting whale. Wang Baoli's eyes lit up. The 9 ancient planets behind him transformed into Tao stars, causing the light of the stars to spread out around his body instantly. It was like a torch in the dark night, appearing at the bottom of the pitch-black sea in an instant. It was particularly eye-catching. The light of the stars on his body spread out and illuminated the surroundings, allowing Wang Baoli to see the details of the humongous rotting whale skeleton even more clearly. All the exposed bones were engraved with symbols. There were also a large number of tiny insects that seemed to be sleeping within the decaying flesh. Each and every one of these tiny insects seemed to be formed from the aura of death. The number of them was enough to shock anyone. This scene was enough to shock most of the planets. Even the planet's prodigies, who possessed the laws of the Soul Fusion planet, would have a drastic change in expression. Their first reaction would be to retreat and leave first. They would have to think about it after making their plans. However, to Wang Baoli, it only made him look a little odd. He narrowed his eyes, but the black star among the 9 ancient stars shone brightly, instantly replacing the light of the other ancient stars. With the augmentation of the Tao star's laws, it shone brightly behind Wang Baoli. the hidden law of this black ancient star was death. As a dark child, Wang Baoli's supernatural powers didn't fear any spirits of the dead. With this double augmentation, Wang Baoli's existence was basically able to ignore all signs of death. With just a quick glance, his body flashed and he approached the rotting whale. Without any hesitation, he followed the crevices in the rotting whale's ribs and charged into it. There was something else within the rotting whale. It was like a biological warship. As Wang Baoli searched, he even saw cabins. However, as time passed, most of them had decayed. In these cabins, Wang Baoli saw corpses. There were so many corpses that there were probably more than 1,000 of them. They had all decayed, and many of them were incomplete as time passed. However, it was clear that they were not human cultivators. Wang Baoli frowned. According to Lin Yu, the moon star sect had left Earth, so they should have been in human form. However, that was not the case here. Wang Baoli examined them carefully and stopped in a cabin. He lowered his head to look at a corpse on the ground. He stared at it for a moment, then fell into deep thought. There are no signs of struggle. It seems like all the beings in the whale died instantly, or did they lose their ability to resist? Wang Baoli was deep in thought. Suddenly, a cold glint flashed in his eyes, the ripples of cultivation in his body erupted instantly. The instant they spread outwards, countless blood threads emerged from the ground beneath his feet and enveloped him. However, they came into contact with the ripples of cultivation that spread outwards from Wang Baoli. Amidst the invisible collision, there were continuous explosions. Following that, even more blood threads appeared from within the rotten whale's body. They charged towards Wang Baoli in a frenzy, as if they wanted to devour him. Furthermore, the blood threads were strange. Wang Baoli could sense that within these blood threads, it seemed to contain a divine ability that could confine life. As long as one was touched by it, they would lose all mobility. Petty tricks. Wang Baoli snorted coldly. He raised his right hand abruptly, ignoring the blood strands that were surging wildly. He grabbed forcefully, and immediately, the rules of blood revolved, forming a blood ring that spread out in all directions. The blood strands that were drifting towards him trembled violently. They seemed to distort and showed signs of retreating. However, as Wang Baoli snorted coldly, they seemed to be forcefully interfered with. They gathered towards Wang Baoli once again. However, this time, they gathered on his palm. In an instant, all the blood threads rushed towards him. Finally, they formed a ball of blood in Wang Baoli's hand. As the ball of blood squirmed, it transformed into a human-shaped little person. As it struggled, it let out an invisible roar towards Wang Baoli. It was as if it wanted to attack his soul. Artifact spirit? With Wang Baoli's attainments in dharmic artifacts, he could tell the origins of the little person at a glance. At that moment, he grabbed the blood-colored little person with his right hand and pressed his left hand against the inner wall of the rotting whale. A cold voice rang out. You have guts. I control the spirits of the dead and the corpses of the dead. Rise. As Wang Baoli spoke, the laws of the ancient black planet spread, and the body of the 100,000-foot-tall rotting whale shook violently. Under the laws of the ancient black planet, a strange force instantly spread throughout the whale's body. It caused the black hole in its eyes, which had already rotted, to instantly reveal a dark fire. Its body trembled as if it had come to life, and it came to life. Although more than half of its body was buried under the mud, as it was endowed with life, and as its body shook violently, with a loud rumble, the rotten whale's tail and fins shook, and its body struggled out of the mud. It revealed the countless blood threads that were connected to its abdomen. And at the other end of the blood threads, at the bottom of the mud, which revealed a deep pit, there was a huge array formation. The blood threads on the array formation were connected to the rotten whale and the tiny blood-red humanoid in Wang Baoli's hands. This scene caused the tiny humanoid, which was struggling non-stop in Wang Baoli's hands and letting out a soundless roar, to be stunned for a moment. Then, its body began to tremble. It looked at Wang Baoli with uncontrollable fear in its eyes. Ignoring the tiny humanoid's fear, Wang Baoli's body flashed and appeared outside the rotten whale. He lowered his head to look at the array formation in the mud at the bottom of the sea. He could feel that this array formation was similar to the array formation in the ruins that he had seen previously. They were all teleportation. At the same time, he could tell that it was different. the array formations in the other ruins were all dilapidated. Even if there were some hidden fluctuations, they were mostly hidden. It was obvious that they had been around for too long and couldn't be activated at all times without replenishment. They were like batteries, in a state of weak electricity. However, the array formation was different. It was completely activated and in a state of strong electricity. Wang Baoli immediately guessed the answer. The whale was indeed a biological dharmic cruiser, and it wasn't from the Moonstar sect. It was from this sect, or perhaps it was for some other reason that it was forcefully sucked onto the array formation, which was used to recharge the array formation. It was also because of this that the teleportation array formation remained in a state that could be activated at any time. It even produced an artifact spirit, or more appropriately, an array spirit. As Wang Baoli guessed all of this in his mind, the array formation began to glow. It was as if the teleportation was about to activate on its own under the stimulation. Wang Baoli's eyes flashed. As the array formation continued to glow, he stomped hard across the air with his right foot. There was a loud boom, and the array formation shook violently. Cracking sounds rang out, and the array formation shattered into pieces. The glow from the array formation slowly dimmed, the glow from the array formation also dimmed. The blood-colored tiny being in Wang Baoli's hand let out a blood-curdling scream. It was extremely dispirited. After being sealed by Wang Baoli, it was immediately put away. Then, without wasting any time, it put away the rotting whale. It turned around and left the sea. When it reappeared, it was at the bottom of another sea. In front of it was the sea grass, and in front of it was a stone statue with a stone sword on its back. The Divine Temple. The moment Wang Baoli appeared, the stone statue's body trembled slightly. Sword chi rose from the stone sword on its back, and it wagged its finger at Wang Baoli. Chapter 999. Chapter 999, Chapter 999, The Intimidation of the Galaxy Bow. Wang Baoli stood there, not moving an inch. A serious look slowly appeared in his eyes as he stared at the stone sculpture. The face of the stone sculpture was blurry, and Wang Baoli couldn't see its exact appearance. However, from its appearance, he could tell that it was a human cultivator. It was filled with the aura of time, and its clothes were extremely ancient. The sword on its back, though made of stone, however, it exuded a sharp sword intent, and Wang Baoli even felt a strong sense of danger. It was as if he were to take a few more steps forward, the sword chi within the stone sword would explode towards him. This could be clearly seen from the countless piles of sea beast carcasses that had been dead for an unknown period of time. This scene made Wang Baoli hesitate in silence. If it wasn't necessary, he didn't want to disturb the arrangement of the temple. After all, the stone statue and the stone sword seemed to possess the power to kill him. This was just the remnants of the sword's power, which had clearly dissipated by more than half after countless years. One could imagine that if it had been countless years ago, when the stone statue and the stone sword had been at their peak, they would have been able to destroy the world with a single strike of the sword. If the original body had been here, he could have used the power of time to force his way in. However, there was still a difference between the clone and the original body. However, when Wang Baoli shifted his gaze away from the stone statue, as he looked at the temple that was filled with seaweed, his eyes slowly lit up. There was no door to the temple. Standing there, one could clearly see that there were no deities worshipped in the temple. Instead, there was a teleportation array formation. The array formation was active, but it was different from the rotting whale array formation. There were thin threads on the array formation, they extended to the surface of the sea and covered more than half of Earth. They were not connected to all living things. Instead, they were connected to the gathering points of spirit chi on Earth. Spirit chi was continuously extracted from them and integrated into the array formation. If Wang Baoli did not have a plan to allow the solar system to integrate with the God's Eye civilization, he could have ignored the arrangements here and chosen to leave. However, that was no longer possible. Through his analysis and judgment, after the solar system had integrated with the God's Eye civilization, the array formation would absorb an indescribable amount of spirit chi in an instant as the spirit chi increased exponentially. When that happened, Wang Baoli didn't dare to bet on what would happen. That was also the reason why he had been sealed in the ruins on Earth. After a moment of silence, Wang Baoli rubbed the space between his brows and cupped his fists and bowed to the stone statue. Senior, this junior really doesn't know if this place is good or evil to the Federation. In order to prevent any mishaps, I wanted to seal the array formation and cut off all ties with the outside world. I was forced to do so. Please forgive me, Senior. Wang Baoli lifted his feet and walked forward. 1 step, 2 steps. However, the moment he took his 3rd step, the stone sword on the back of the stone sculpture suddenly buzzed. The sword chi suddenly erupted and turned into a long rainbow that charged toward Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes and retreated abruptly. He took 7 steps back and left the restricted area of the divine temple. However, the sword chi could not suppress its murderous intent. No matter how far Wang Baoli retreated, it continued to approach him with a murderous aura. It was as if it would kill him even if it was at the ends of the earth. Just as it was about to reach Wang Baoli, a cold glint flashed in Wang Baoli's eyes. Looks like it's evil. As he said that, Wang Baoli raised his right hand. Immediately, a gigantic bow appeared in his hand. The moment the bow appeared, the seabed rumbled. Even the solar system trembled and the sun dimmed. Even the masked little Missy and the galactic patriarch, who were reminiscing about the past on the ancient bronze sword, looked in the direction of Earth. This is the galaxy bow. The little Missy's eyes were solemn. As she spoke softly, deep in the ocean on Earth, opposite the stone statue in the divine temple, Wang Baoli pulled the bowstring with his right hand. He let out a low growl, and his cultivation erupted completely. The 9 ancient stars behind him shone, and the Tao stars that formed emitted a blinding light. All the power of cultivation gathered, and the bowstring was finally pulled open by Wang Baoli. Even though it wasn't a full moon, it was about 70% pulled open. The gemstones that looked like stars that were embedded in the bow were also shining rapidly. One of them lit up. Even though it wasn't fully lit up, it still gave off a faint glow, causing the area around Wang Baoli to glow with the fire of the stars. The source of the fire was this bow. Just as little Missy had said, this bow was indeed the replica galaxy bow that Wang Baoli had found in the storage ring that contained the mysterious bottle and the paper figurine. Even though it was a replica, its power was still earth-shattering. Even the current Wang Baoli could only reach the full moon once in his strongest state after fusing with his original body. His current clone could only reach 70%. Even so, the suppressive force that emanated from it still caused the rapidly approaching sword chi to suddenly stop in front of Wang Baoli, as if hesitating. I'll only destroy the power that emanates from the array formation, preventing it from activating itself. I won't do anything else. Wang Baoli stared at the rainbow formed by the sword chi. He didn't release the bowstring, but the ferocity in his eyes had already spread out his will decisively. After 7 to 8 breaths, the rainbow instantly fell backwards and returned to the stone sword. The suppressive force that emanated from it also disappeared. Even though the sword chi had disappeared, Wang Baoli didn't let his guard down. He maintained the state of drawing the bow and walked towards the stone statue. As he approached, the stone statue didn't move. Wang Baoli stepped into the divine temple. The stone statue didn't change at all. Seeing this, Wang Baoli didn't waste any more time. He raised his right foot and stomped hard on the array formation. As he circulated his cultivation, a loud boom reverberated. The array formation of the divine temple shattered immediately. The threads that had been released also broke. After checking it again and again, Wang Baoli finally left the area around the temple. A terrifying existence was rarely seen in the starry sky. In fact, if it wanted to, whether it was the left Tao or the side Tao sacred region, it could run amok. Basically, most of the civilizations in front of it were so weak that they could not withstand a single blow. And its arrival was immediately noticed by the ancient bronze sword tip in the solar system. The Tao Palace Patriarch who was meditating on the 3rd altar instantly noticed it. The old man's eyes suddenly opened, revealing a look of shock and uncertainty. His breathing was also rapid. As his chest rose and fell, he stared fixedly in the direction of the old ox. His expression changed again and again, and his body slowly stood up. He was about to open his mouth to speak, but at this moment, the old ox, who had descended from outside the solar system, spoke first. He didn't speak to just one person, but sent out a divine thought that affected the entire solar system. At that moment, no matter what anyone in the solar system was doing, his words which were filled with the vicissitudes of life and carried a sense of authority, suddenly appeared in his mind. I, Yang Ling, am here under the orders of the exalted Lord Blazing Flame to welcome the 16th young master, Wang Baoli, back to the Blazing Flame galaxy. This thought was like a storm, instantly filling the entire solar system. The moment it entered the minds of all living beings, the Dao Palace cultivators on the ancient green bronze sword were all shaken. Even those who had been injured, unconscious, and recovering, their bodies began to tremble unconsciously. As for the Galactic Patriarch on the third altar, his eyes narrowed instantly. His breathing quickened, and although he heaved a sigh of relief after learning of the other party's background, his mind was once again focused. He had thought that Wang Baoli wouldn't lie to him. Since he had said that he was the disciple of the Blazing Flame Patriarch, he had to be. However, he hadn't expected that Wang Baoli's disciple's identity would be even more shocking than he had imagined. What kind of disciple would make the Blazing Flame Patriarch arrange for a galactic realm mighty figure to come and welcome him? I'm afraid that apart from welcoming him, he would also have to intimidate the heart of the Dao Palace, as well as the other political forces. He would have to make sure that all the political forces that had been paying attention to the solar system's integration with the Divine Eye would be restrained. All of this is ultimately due to the importance that we place on Wang Baoli. The Dao Palace Patriarch was silent. The importance that he placed on Wang Baoli also increased. At the same time, countless citizens and cultivators from the Federation, as well as Lin Qianhao, Liu Daobin, and others who were familiar with Wang Baoli, were all shocked as the voices in their minds surfaced. The 16th young master? Wang Baoli. Although I don't know the details of his identity, he sounds impressive. He must be extraordinary. As expected of the Guardian of the Federation. The founder of the Martian Special Zone. The old leader that I, Liu Daobin, have followed for my entire life. Amidst the uproar, Zhao Yameng's mother, Li Xingwen, sect Lord Shu of the Galactic Dusk Sect, and Lin Yu all took a deep breath and looked at Mars from different positions. Wang Baoli had told them that he was leaving, and he had also told them where he was going. However, even though they were mentally prepared, they were still shaken. The old bull's terror and the words he had said with his telepathic thoughts had given them a clear understanding of Wang Baoli's status, and the unpredictability of his future. Their determination, which had never been about to change, was now even stronger. Even Zhao Yameng's mother had an idea in her mind. She planned to talk to Zhao Yameng about her future with Wang Baoli when she returned. At the same time, she had made up her mind to take special care of Zhu Xiaoya. She had a strong worry in her heart. She was worried that Wang Baoli, who was moving further and further away, would one day grow too big and too fast. He would gradually grow distant from the Federation. Even though she felt that the possibility was very, very small, as the Federation president, she had to consider it. The best way would be to make the other party worry about her. Other than her parents, she would also be able to join in, naturally, that would be her woman. The hearts of all living beings were shaken. Countless thoughts rose in their minds. Wang Baoli, who was on Mars, put down the bowl and chopsticks in his hands. He stood up and bowed deeply to his parents, who were looking at him with reluctance. Dad, Mom. I don't know how long we'll be gone for, but I don't think it'll be too long. You guys. Take care. Go, Baoli. You have to take care too. Wang Baoli's mother suppressed her sadness and said softly. His father nodded at the side. He watched as Wang Baoli's bent back gradually disappeared from where he stood. After he had completely disappeared, Baoli's mother couldn't hold it in any longer. Tears streamed down her cheeks. A soft sigh came from Wang Baoli's heart, who had appeared in the starry skies. He was reluctant to part with her, but he knew that stepping onto this path of cultivation was like sailing against the current. If he didn't advance, he would retreat. Therefore, he could only continue forward. Only in this way could he protect everything that he wanted to protect, and he could see the wider world. At the same time, Wang Baoli was filled with gratitude towards the Blazing Flame ancestor. He knew very well that the divine thoughts that came from the solar system were his master's love for him. This love was reflected in the fear of those who harbored ill intentions. It was also reflected in the peace of mind for his family and friends back home. Wang Baoli was satisfied with his master's kind intentions. He stood in the starry sky, looking at the solar system and Earth. He vaguely saw the figure of a woman standing on the mountain peak of ethereal Tao College, which had been rebuilt on Earth. Her beautiful hair fluttered in the wind. It covered her face, but it couldn't hide the gentle gaze in her eyes. They seemed to be able to touch each other across the starry sky. Wang Baoli looked at her for a long time, then nodded. He turned around and dashed towards the outer solar system. He wasn't worried about the Federation this time. Be it the alliance agreement with the vast expanse Tao Palace, or the improvement in the level of the people after they had integrated with the God's Eye civilization, the Federation was completely different from before. It was even more powerful, and the blazing flame ancestor was also present. All of this allowed the Federation to develop steadily for a period of time in the future. Then, I'll go and see just how vast and resplendent this starry sky is. Wang Baoli was in high spirits. His eyes shone brightly, and his body transformed into a long rainbow with a loud bang. He traveled at an astonishing speed across the current solar system and appeared outside the solar system. He saw the vast sea of fire and the center of the sea of fire. His entire body was exuding a terrifying aura. The old bull.